The surgical steel cart hit the gunman's throat before anyone saw her move. Blood sprayed across the white tile as he dropped, weapon clattering. The nurses screamed. The doctors froze. But she didn't. Her hands, steady as ice, were already reaching for the trauma shears, eyes tracking the second shooter rounding the corner. 3 hours ago, they'd shoved her out of the trauma bay, called her too soft, too green, too scared to handle real medicine. Now, as gunfire echoed through Mercy General's corridors and smoke poured from the East Wing, the woman they'd dismissed as worthless was the only thing standing between 47 patients and a massacre. If you want to see how the nurse they underestimated became the only one who could save them all, stay until the very end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button. You won't believe what happens next. The explosion came at 1447. Sarah Voss was restocking gauze in the supply closet when the building shook. Not an earthquake tremor. She'd felt those before. This was different. Sharper. The kind of percussion that comes from shaped charges and bad intentions. She set down the boxes with deliberate calm, walked to the hallway and listened. Screams from the lobby, running footsteps. Then the unmistakable crack of automatic weapons fire. She'd been at Mercy General for 8 months. Nobody knew her story. Nobody asked. Code Silver! Code Silver! Active shooter! East entrance! The PA system crackled with panic. Sarah moved toward the trauma wing, not away from it. Her sneakers made no sound on the linoleum. Years of training don't vanish just because you stop using them. They settle into muscle memory, waiting. Dr. Marcus Holland burst through the stairwell door, face flushed, voice shaking. Lockdown! Everyone to the... He spotted Sarah and his expression shifted from terror to irritation. What are you doing? Get to the break room with the others. Trauma 2 has 3 patients on vents, she said quietly. Someone needs to... I said, get to the break room. Holland pushed past her. This isn't a debate, Voss. She'd heard that tone before. The one that said, you don't belong here. The one that came from doctors who saw her file, RN with 7 years experience but no references, no hospital history before Mercy General, gaps in her resume that raised questions nobody wanted answered. Sarah turned toward Trauma 2 anyway. Did you hear me? Holland grabbed her shoulder. You're not authorized for critical care during an emergency. You lack the experience. Those patients can't breathe on their own. Then someone qualified will handle it. Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. Holland flinched. Sarah didn't. Go, he said, releasing her. Now. She went, but not to the break room. The trauma wing smelled like disinfectant and fear. Sarah slipped through the service entrance, avoiding the main corridor where staff were herding patients into lockdown positions. Through the observation window, she could see Trauma 2, 3 beds, 3 ventilators, 3 people who had maybe 90 seconds before the backup generators kicked in, if they kicked in at all. The door was locked. Protocol. She pulled a key card from her pocket, the one she wasn't supposed to have, the one she'd lifted from the supply supervisor's desk 3 months ago just in case. The lock clicked green. Inside, the monitors were going haywire. One patient, a car crash victim, skull fracture, induced coma, was already starting to desat. Sarah checked the ventilator connections, adjusted the oxygen flow, silenced the alarms. Her hands moved with the kind of precision that comes from doing something 1,000 times in situations far worse than this. Hey! She turned. A younger nurse stood in the doorway, eyes wide. Amy something, new grad, scared out of her mind. What are you doing? Amy whispered. Dr. Holland said, I know what he said. Sarah didn't look up from the second patient's IV line. You can report me later. Right now, help me or leave. Amy hesitated, then stepped inside. What do you need? Check his vitals. If his pressure drops below 90 systolic, let me know. They worked in silence for maybe 2 minutes. Then Amy spoke again, quieter now. You're not scared. Being scared doesn't help them. Everyone else is losing it, even the attendings. Sarah finished adjusting the 3rd ventilator and finally met Amy's eyes. Some people train for chaos, some don't. Where did you train? The question hung there. Sarah had a prepared answer, something vague about a hospital in Oregon, a program that didn't keep great records. But before she could deliver it, the door slammed open. Dr. Holland, flanked by 2 security guards. His face was purple. "I told you to stand down." He crossed the room in 3 strides. "You directly violated an order during a critical incident. The patients needed, I don't care what they needed. You don't make those calls." He gestured to the guards. "Escort her to the break room. If she resists, remove her from the building." Amy opened her mouth to protest. Sarah caught her eye and shook her head slightly. "Don't." The guards took her arms. Not rough, but firm. Sarah didn't fight. Fighting would raise questions she couldn't answer. She let them walk her toward the exit, past the nurse's station where 3 of her co-workers watched with expressions ranging from pity to satisfaction. Linda Chen, the charge nurse who'd blocked Sarah's last 3 shift requests, actually smiled. Maybe now they'll hire someone who follows instructions. Sarah said nothing. She'd learned a long time ago that silence was armor. They were halfway to the main entrance when the second wave hit. The east entrance doors exploded inward. Not blown open, demolished. Glass and metal flew like shrapnel. The security guards dropped, hands over their heads. Sarah turned toward the sound, adrenaline sharpening everything to crystal clarity. 4 men in tactical gear poured through the smoking entrance. Not cops, not SWAT. Wrong equipment, wrong movement patterns. Mercenaries. Contractors. The kind who worked for people with money and no morals. The lead man raised his weapon, short barrel, suppressor, and fired 3 rounds into the ceiling. Acoustic shock. Get everyone on the ground before they can think. It worked. Staff and patients dropped like puppets with cut strings, screaming, crying, begging. Sarah dropped too, but differently. She hit the floor in a controlled descent, already scanning for cover, exits, improvised weapons. The guards beside her were frozen, hands trembling as they reached for equipment they weren't trained to use. "Nobody moves!" The lead gunman's voice was professional, calm, not his first time. "Stay down, stay quiet. You lived through this." 2 of his team started moving through the lobby, zip-tying wrists. The 4th headed straight for the trauma wing. Sarah's mind raced. This wasn't random. Active shooters don't breach a hospital with shaped charges and tactical precision. They don't move in teams with clear objectives. This was an extraction, or an assassination. Either way, someone in that trauma wing was the target. The soldier from this morning. She'd only seen him for 30 seconds before Holland kicked her out of the room. Caucasian male, mid-30s, multiple GSWs to the torso and left leg. No ID, no wallet, no tags. The kind of patient who arrives without a name and leaves without a record. The kind soldiers want back. The gunmen reached the trauma wing entrance. Through the glass, Sarah could see nurses huddled in the corner. Could see Dr. Holland trying to reason with another armed man already inside. The ventilator patients were in trauma too, right in the middle of it. Sarah made a choice. She rolled left behind an overturned intake desk and came up in a crouch. One of the guards started to say something. She put a hand over his mouth. "Stay down. Don't be a hero." His eyes went wide. She released him and moved. The nearest gunman had his back to her, focused on zip-tying a terrified orderly. Sarah grabbed a steel IV pole from an overturned crash cart and swung it like a staff, catching him behind the knee. He buckled. She reversed the swing, brought the pole across his throat, and dropped him with a leveraged choke that cut blood flow to his brain in under 3 seconds. He went limp. She caught his weapon before it hit the ground, cleared the chamber, and tucked it into her waistband. No shots. No sound. The other gunmen hadn't noticed. Yet. Linda Chen was watching from behind a reception desk, eyes huge. Sarah met her gaze and pressed a finger to her lips. Linda nodded, too shocked to do anything else. The second gunman was near the pharmacy entrance, kneeling to restrain an elderly patient. Sarah crossed the distance in 4 silent strides, grabbed a fire extinguisher from the wall mount, and brought it down on the base of his skull. Not hard enough to kill, hard enough to turn off his lights for the next 10 minutes. 2 down, 2 still active. And now she had a problem. The lead gunman was smart. He'd positioned himself where he could see both entrances and most of the lobby. Taking him down quiet wasn't an option. She'd have to make noise, which meant the 4th man, the one inside the trauma wing, would hear it and react. Sarah crouched beside the pharmacy entrance, thinking. The tactical part of her brain, the part she'd tried to bury under 8 months of bedpans and vitals checks, was awake now. running calculations, probability trees, threat assessment. She could wait for SWAT. They'd be here in maybe 12 minutes, maybe less. But 12 minutes was a long time when men with guns were inside a hospital wing full of people who couldn't run. Movement. The fourth gunman exited the trauma wing, dragging someone, a nurse, unconscious or dead. Sarah couldn't tell. He said something into his radio. The lead gunman responded, then started moving toward the trauma wing entrance. They were consolidating, getting ready to move their target out. Sarah made another choice. She stepped into the open. "Federal officer, drop your weapons." It was a bluff. She wasn't federal anymore. Hadn't been for 3 years. But the gunmen didn't know that. They only knew someone was shouting with authority and moving like they knew how to use the weapon they were holding. The lead gunman spun, bringing his rifle up. Sarah was faster. She put 2 rounds into the wall beside his head. Not at him, at the wall. Concrete dust exploded. He flinched, dove for cover. The fourth gunman dropped the nurse and raised his weapon. Sarah was already moving, using a fallen gurney as cover, angling for the trauma wing. If she could get inside, she could seal the door. Buy time. Glass shattered, rounds chewed through the walls, not suppressed anymore. They'd gone loud. Sarah vaulted over a reception desk, hit the ground rolling, came up beside a medication cart. Her stolen rifle was empty. She'd forgotten to check the magazine. Rookie mistake, the kind that gets you killed. The lead gunman was advancing, methodical and calm. "You're not a cop. Cops don't move like you." Sarah stayed silent. Let him guess. "Military?" He was closer now, 20 feet. "You got that contractor look? Black ops? Spec ops?" 15 feet. "Doesn't matter." He raised his weapon. "Either way, you're in the way." Sarah grabbed the medication cart and shoved it at him with everything she had. It caught him mid-stride, bottles and syringes flying. He stumbled. She closed the distance, grabbed his rifle barrel, and redirected his next shot into the floor. Then she drove her elbow into his throat, followed by a knee to the solar plexus. He went down gasping. She didn't celebrate. The fourth gunman was still active, still armed, still between her and the trauma wing. She grabbed the lead man's rifle. This one had ammunition, and started moving. But she wasn't fast enough. The fourth gunman came around the corner, weapon up, trained on her center mass. His finger was on the trigger. No hesitation. No mercy. Then his head snapped back. He dropped. Sarah spun. Dr. Holland stood near the trauma wing entrance, holding a small caliber pistol with shaking hands, the kind of gun people keep in desk drawers and never expect to use. His face was white. It's okay." Sarah lowered her rifle. "You did good." Holland looked at her like he'd never seen her before. "Who are you?" Before she could answer, the PA system crackled again. Not the panicked administrator from before, a different voice. Male, cold, professional. "Mercy General, this is Lieutenant Colonel James Voss, United States Army Special Operations Command. We are inbound with a tactical response team. Hostiles are to stand down immediately. Any harm to patients or staff will be met with lethal force." Sarah's blood went cold. Voss. Her last name. Not a coincidence. Holland stared at her. "You're related to No." The word came out harder than she intended. "Not related. Same last name. Happens." But it was a lie. And from the look in Holland's eyes, he knew it. Outside, she could hear rotors, helicopters, multiple birds, coming in fast and low. Through the shattered entrance, she saw vehicles arriving, black SUVs with government plates, armored transports, men in tactical gear that made the mercenaries look like amateurs. The cavalry was here. And Sarah knew exactly why. The soldier in Trauma 1 wasn't just any operator. He was someone important enough to warrant a full-scale military response. Important enough that his enemies had tried to hit him inside a civilian hospital. Important enough that her father, the man she hadn't spoken to in 3 years, was leading the rescue personally. Holland grabbed her arm. "Those patients in Trauma 2, you saved them. They're still in there. We need to—" "I know." He cut her off. "And I'm sorry for what I said, for not listening." Sarah met his eyes, saw genuine contrition there. Also questions. So many questions. "Later," she said. "Right now we have about 90 seconds before a Spec Ops team breaches this building and treats everyone inside like a potential threat. We need to get patients secured and make sure nobody does anything stupid. Holland nodded, then hesitated. The man on the PA, Lieutenant Colonel Voss. If you're not related, why did you react like that when you heard his name? Sarah picked up the rifle she'd taken from the mercenary leader and checked the chamber one more time. Outside, boots were hitting pavement, orders being shouted, the sound of a professional military operation rolling into action. Because, she said quietly, he's the reason I stopped being a soldier. And I'm the reason he stopped sleeping through the night. The main entrance exploded inward for the third time that day. This time it was flashbangs and smoke grenades. This time it was men in American flag patches and weapons that cost more than most people's cars. And leading them, older but still moving with the kind of controlled aggression that made junior officers nervous and enemies dead, was Lieutenant Colonel James Voss. He scanned the lobby with the efficiency of someone who'd cleared 1,000 rooms in a dozen countries. His eyes passed over the wounded mercenaries, the terrified staff, the destruction. Then they found Sarah, standing in the middle of it all with a rifle in her hands and blood spatter on her scrubs. Their eyes met. For 3 seconds, neither of them moved. Then James Voss did something Sarah had never seen him do in 20 years of knowing him. He lowered his weapon, removed his helmet, and spoke her name with something that sounded almost like fear. Emma. Not Sarah. Emma. Her real name, the one she'd left behind 3 years ago along with her uniform, her clearance, and the last shred of respect she'd had for the man standing across from her. Holland looked between them. I thought you said you weren't related. Emma Sarah Voss kept her eyes on her father and said what she'd been saying for 3 years. We're not. James Voss stood there like a monument to every mistake Emma had spent 3 years trying to forget. The other operators fanned out behind him, weapons ready, scanning for threats that were already neutralized or bleeding out on the tile. He didn't move. Just stared at her with that expression she remembered from the last time they'd been in the same room, the court-martial hearing where she'd refused to defend herself and he'd refused to look at her. Secure the building, he said without breaking eye contact. Medical personnel, identify yourselves. Anyone armed who isn't military, drop your weapon now. Emma set the rifle on the floor and kicked it toward the nearest operator. Holland beside her raised his hand slowly, still holding the small pistol that had saved her life 2 minutes ago. He's a doctor, Emma said. He shot one of the hostiles, self-defense. James finally looked away from her. Weapon on the ground, sir. Slowly. Holland complied. An operator moved forward to secure it, then gave James a nod. Clear. Trauma wing, James said. What's the status? 3 patients on ventilators in trauma 2, Emma replied. Her voice came out flat, professional, like she was briefing a superior officer instead of talking to the man who'd raised her. 1 high-value asset in Trauma 1, GSW to torso and leg, stable when I last checked 20 minutes ago. Unknown number of staff sheltering in place. 4 hostiles down, 2 unconscious, 1 deceased, 1... She glanced toward the lead mercenary she'd choked out. He was starting to stir. That one's coming around. An operator moved to zip-tie him. James kept his eyes on Emma. You cleared this? I didn't clear anything. I defended patients. With military combatives and weapon retention techniques. Emma shrugged. YouTube's very educational. Something flickered across James's face. Not quite a smile, not quite pain. Emma. It's Sarah now. She crossed her arms. Sarah Voss. Check the hospital records if you don't believe me. I know what name you're using. His voice dropped lower. I've known where you were for 6 months. That hit harder than she expected. Emma felt Holland looking at her, felt the questions building, felt the careful wall she'd constructed between who she'd been and who she was trying to become starting to crack. Then you know I don't work for you anymore, she said. I don't work for anyone in a uniform. I'm just a nurse who got caught in a bad situation. Nurses don't move like that. This one does. James took a step forward. His team was finishing their sweep, calling out clear signals as they moved through the building. Outside, she could hear more vehicles arriving. EMTs, local PD. The media wouldn't be far behind. We need to talk, James said quietly. No, we don't. The man in Trauma 1 is none of my business. Emma turned toward Holland. Dr. Holland, we should check on the patients. Make sure everyone's stable before Captain Emma Voss? James's voice carried the weight of command now, the tone that made soldiers stand straighter without thinking about it. That man in there is Captain Marcus Webb. He was part of a classified operation that went sideways 3 days ago in Caracas. The men who hit this hospital were cartel contractors trying to finish what they started. This is a matter of national security. Emma stopped, turned back. Then handle it. You're good at that. I need your help. The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. Emma stared at him, searching for the angle, the manipulation, the thing he wasn't saying. James Voss didn't ask for help. He gave orders and expected compliance. Why? She asked. Because Webb's dying. James's jaw tightened. The gunshot wounds aren't the problem. He was exposed to something in Caracas. Something that's shutting down his organs one system at a time. Our medics have tried everything. Nothing's working. He's got maybe 12 hours before his liver fails completely. Holland stepped forward. We have specialists, toxicology, nephrology. This isn't a toxin. James pulled a tablet from his vest and brought up a medical chart. Emma recognized the interface. Military medical records, encrypted, eyes-only access. It's biological, engineered, the kind of thing that doesn't exist in civilian medicine. Emma glanced at the chart despite herself. The numbers were bad. Liver enzymes through the roof, kidney function dropping, inflammatory markers that suggested his immune system was attacking itself. She'd seen something similar once, years ago, in a lab outside Tikrit where they'd found vials of experimental bioweapons the insurgents had been trying to weaponize. You need a military hospital, she said. Walter Reed, Landstuhl. He won't survive transport. We've got a medevac bird on standby, but his pressure's too unstable. He crashes the second we move him. James looked at her with something that might have been desperation if he'd been anyone else. You worked with bioweapons in Iraq. You know how to stabilize exposure victims. That was 8 years ago. You saved 3 soldiers in Ramadi when everyone else said they were already dead. Emma felt the memories rising. The makeshift lab in the abandoned warehouse. The smell of chemicals and fear. The way one of the soldiers had looked at her when she'd told him he was going to make it. Like she was the only solid thing in a world that was dissolving around him. She'd saved those 3 men. Then 6 months later, she'd refused to shoot someone who'd turned out to be wearing a suicide vest, and 12 civilians had died in the blast. The military had called it a judgment failure. James had called it weakness. Emma had called it the only choice her conscience would let her live with. I'm not that person anymore, she said. I know. James closed the tablet. You're better. You chose healing over killing. I respect that. But right now, Marcus Webb needs someone who understands both. Holland touched Emma's arm. If you can help, I can't. She pulled away. I don't have clearance. I don't have authorization. I don't even have privileges in critical care at this hospital. Dr. Holland here made that very clear earlier today. Holland's face went red. I was wrong. I shouldn't have. You weren't wrong. Emma's voice stayed level. I'm not qualified. I don't have the credentials. I cut corners and ignore protocols because I think I know better. You were absolutely right to remove me from patient care. She meant every word. Holland had been right. She was a liability. Too much training and killing, not enough trust in the system that was supposed to save people through committees and approvals and layers of bureaucracy that moved too slow for her combat-trained instincts. James watched her with that analytical stare she remembered from childhood, the one that meant he was reading her tells, calculating her responses, planning 3 moves ahead. What if I gave you authorization? He said. You can't. I can. Under the Defense Production Act, during a national security emergency, military command can deputize civilian medical personnel for classified operations. 1 signature and you're back in. Temporary commission, full authority, all the clearances you need. Emma laughed. It came out bitter. You want me to rejoin the military to save 1 soldier? After you spent 2 years telling me I was a disgrace to the uniform? I never said that. You didn't have to. Emma's hands curled into fists at her sides. You said it with your silence, at the hearing, at the discharge proceedings, when I called you after they let me go and you didn't pick up. James flinched, barely visible, but Emma had spent 18 years learning to read his micro-expressions. That tiny movement was as close to an admission of guilt as she'd ever get from him. I was wrong, he said quietly. The lobby had gone silent. The operators were pretending not to listen, But Emma could feel their attention. Holland stood frozen beside her, clearly wishing he was anywhere else. From the trauma wing, she could hear the steady beep of monitors, the hiss of ventilators, the normal sounds of a hospital trying to remember how to function after being invaded. "You're always wrong," Emma said. "The difference is you never admit it." "I'm admitting it now." James took another step forward, close enough that she could see the gray at his temples, the new lines around his eyes, the weight of command that had aged him faster than time alone could explain. "You made the right call in Mosul. That kid wasn't a threat. Your instincts were correct. I should have backed you up." Emma felt something crack inside her chest. 3 years of anger and grief and shame pressing against a dam that suddenly had a fissure running through it. "He detonated anyway," she whispered. "I didn't shoot him, and he killed 12 people. He detonated because his handler triggered the device remotely. The investigation confirmed it. You couldn't have stopped it." James's voice gentled. "But I let you believe it was your fault. I let the board crucify you because it was easier than admitting our intelligence was garbage, and our rules of engagement were designed to cover asses instead of save lives." Holland shifted uncomfortably. "Maybe this conversation should happen somewhere more private." "No." Emma kept her eyes locked on James. "He wants me to help. He can say it here, in front of witnesses. What exactly are you asking for?" James straightened. Back to business. "Temporary reinstatement, 48 hours. You stabilize Captain Webb long enough for transport. You provide consultation on the biological agent he was exposed to, and then you're done. You walk away. No strings, no obligations. Just one soldier helping another." "I'm not a soldier." "You'll always be a soldier." James's voice hardened again. "You can wear scrubs and change your name and pretend you're someone else, but when that shooting started, what did you do? You assessed threats. You eliminated hostiles. You moved with tactical efficiency that most of my operators would envy. That's not nursing instinct, Emma. That's training. That's who you are." Emma wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was wrong, that she'd left that person behind, that the woman who could choke out a mercenary and steal his weapon was an aberration, not her true self. But the lie wouldn't come, because he was right. When the shooting started, she hadn't thought like a nurse. She'd thought like a soldier. And part of her, the part she'd been trying to smother for 3 years, had felt alive for the first time since her discharge. "If I do this," she said slowly, "I want something in return." James nodded. "Name it." "The staff at this hospital, the nurses, the doctors, the people who froze when the shooting started. They don't get investigated. They don't get questioned about why they weren't heroes. They don't get their trauma turned into a performance review." "Done." "And Dr. Holland?" Emma glanced at him. "He gets a commendation. He saved my life. He shot an armed hostile in defense of patients and staff. That goes on record." Holland's eyes widened. "That's not necessary." "It is." Emma cut him off. "You pulled a trigger to save someone. That's harder than most people think. You deserve recognition." James pulled out his phone and typed something quickly. "Approved. What else?" "The patients in trauma too. They stay here. They don't get moved to a military facility. They don't become part of whatever classified operation this turns into. They're civilians. They stay civilian." "Agreed." Emma took a breath. "And when this is over, you leave me alone. No check-ins. No welfare visits. No reports on where I'm working or what I'm doing. You go back to your wars and I go back to my shifts and we pretend we're strangers who happen to share a last name." James's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes dimmed. "If that's what you want." "It is." "Then we have a deal." He extended his hand, military formality, the kind of gesture that turned conversations into contracts. Emma looked at his hand for a long moment, thought about all the times he'd taught her to shake on promises, thought about the last time they'd stood facing each other, after the court-martial, when she'd waited for him to offer some sign of support, and he turned and walked away. She took his hand. His grip was still strong, still certain. "Captain Voss?" he said formally. "Welcome back." "It's Lieutenant Voss," she corrected, "and it's temporary." James released her hand. "Captain was your last rank on file. Regulations say you return at the rank you held upon discharge." "I was dishonorably discharged." "The discharge was overturned 6 months ago. Didn't you check your mail?" Emma stared at him. "What?" The review board reconsidered the case based on new evidence from the Mosul investigation. Your discharge was changed to honorable. Back pay was deposited into the account we had on file. James pulled out his tablet again and brought up a document. You've been eligible for reinstatement this whole time. I assumed you knew. She felt dizzy. 6 months. She'd spent 6 months working entry-level nursing jobs with a resume full of gaps and lies, scraping by on wages that barely covered rent, too proud to ask for help and too angry to check whether the system that had thrown her away had changed its mind. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice came out hoarse. Would you have listened? Fair point. Emma grabbed the tablet and scanned the document. It was real, signed by a 3-star general she'd never met. Effective 6 months ago. All her benefits reinstated, all her clearances restored. Like the past 3 years had been a bad dream she could wake up from. Except she couldn't. Because those 3 years had changed her, had taught her that being a soldier wasn't the only way to matter, had shown her that healing could be harder and more important than fighting. This doesn't change anything, she said, handing back the tablet. I'm still not staying in. This is temporary. 48 hours. Understood. James gestured to one of his operators. Sergeant Martinez, brief Captain Voss on Captain Webb's condition. I want a full medical assessment in 15 minutes. Martinez stepped forward, young, Latino, built like someone who did PT for fun. He had the kind of face that probably smiled easy when he wasn't standing in a shot-up hospital lobby. Ma'am, Captain Webb is currently not here, Emma cut him off. Take me to him. I need to see the patient, not read about him. Martinez looked at James for confirmation. James nodded. Emma followed Martinez toward the trauma wing, acutely aware of Holland walking beside her. The doctor had been silent since James's revelation about the discharge, but she could feel his questions building like pressure behind a dam. You don't have to say it, Emma said quietly as they walked. Say what? That I lied on my application, that I misrepresented my background, that I never should have been hired in the first place. Holland was quiet for a few steps. Then, actually, I was going to say I'm sorry for underestimating you, and for assuming you lacked experience when clearly you have more than anyone else on staff. Emma glanced at him. No judgment in his expression, just honest contrition. I wasn't lying about my credentials, she said. I am a registered nurse. I did complete the training. I just left out the part about doing it in a combat zone while also running reconnaissance operations in hostile territory. That's a significant omission. Would you have hired me if you knew? Holland considered that. Probably not. I would have assumed you were overqualified and would leave as soon as you got bored. Smart assumption. They reached the trauma wing. Martinez held the door open. Inside, the damage from the attack was visible. Bullet holes in the walls, shattered glass, overturned equipment. But the patients were still there, still alive, still connected to the machines that breathed for them. Amy, the young nurse who'd helped Emma earlier, stood near the nurse's station. Her scrubs were torn and she had a cut above her eyebrow, but she was on her feet checking charts like it was a normal Tuesday. Dr. Holland, she said when she saw them, the vented patients are stable. I've been monitoring them since... She trailed off, noticing Emma. You came back. Temporarily. Emma moved past her toward Trauma 1. Through the observation window, she could see a man in his 30s lying on a bed, connected to more tubes and monitors than most ICU patients. His skin had a grayish tinge that suggested his organs were failing faster than the machines could compensate. Martinez handed her a tablet with Webb's chart. Emma scanned it quickly, her mind automatically cataloging the data. Heart rate elevated, blood pressure supported by pressors, liver enzymes climbing, kidney function dropping, coagulation factors all wrong. What was he exposed to, she asked. Unknown. The operation was supposed to be simple: infiltrate a cartel compound, extract intel, get out. Webb's team breached the main building and found a lab. Industrial equipment, chemical storage, the works. Webb was point, so he went in first. Something triggered. Maybe a proximity alarm, maybe a booby trap. Aerosol dispersal. He got a face full of it before his mask sealed. Emma looked up from the chart. What happened to the rest of his team? Martinez's jaw tightened. They're dead. All of them. Webb was the only one who made it to the extraction point. The words settled like stones in Emma's gut. She'd been on operations that went bad. Had seen teams wiped out by intelligence failures or bad luck, or enemies who were smarter than expected. But biological weapons were different. They killed slow and they killed ugly. Has anyone analyzed the compound from his gear? She asked. CDC has a team working on it. So far, they've identified 3 different neurotoxins, 2 heavy metals, and something they can't classify. It's like someone threw together every nasty chemical they could find and hoped for the best. Or hoped for the worst. Emma set down the tablet. I need to examine him. Full access, no observation, only protocols. Martinez looked uncomfortable. Ma'am, protocol says I'm an officer with medical clearance conducting an assessment on a dying soldier. Open the door. He did. Emma stepped into Trauma 1 and immediately felt the temperature difference. They'd lowered it to slow his metabolism, buy time for his organs. Webb's eyes were closed, but he wasn't sedated. She could see the rapid eye movement that meant he was conscious, just too weak to respond. She moved to his bedside and checked his pupils. Sluggish, but reactive. Good. She palpated his abdomen. Tender, distended. His liver was enlarged, struggling to filter toxins it had no defense against. Captain Webb, she said quietly, can you hear me? His eyelids fluttered. Didn't open, but the heart monitor spiked slightly. He'd heard her. My name is Emma Voss. I'm here to help. I need you to stay with me. Can you do that? Another spike on the monitor. Affirmative. Emma pulled a penlight and checked his sclera. Yellowing, jaundice. His liver was failing faster than the chart suggested. She had less time than she thought. She turned to Martinez. Get me a metabolic panel, coag studies, and a tox screen. I want blood cultures, arterial blood gas, and a portable ultrasound. Also, I need... The door opened. James stood in the entrance with 2 men in civilian clothes. One was in his 50s, gray-haired, with the bearing of someone who'd never worn a uniform but held authority anyway. The other was younger, 30s, carrying a metal case that screamed classified equipment. Captain Voss, James said, this is Dr. Richard Kelso from USAMRIID and his associate, Dr. Park. They're our bioweapons specialist. Kelso stepped forward without offering to shake hands. We've been working Webb's case since he was extracted. I understand you have experience with chemical exposure treatment. Some. Then you understand this is beyond conventional medicine. The compound he was exposed to is designed to overwhelm standard detox protocols. We've tried chelation, dialysis, antidote therapy. Nothing works. His body is destroying itself from the inside out. Emma looked back at Webb. His breathing had changed, becoming more labored despite the oxygen support. Time was running out. What about experimental treatments? She asked. Kelso exchanged a glance with Park. There's one option, highly experimental, not FDA approved. Significant risk of catastrophic side effects. More catastrophic than dying. Different kind of catastrophic. Kelso nodded to Park, who opened the metal case. Inside were 3 vials of pale blue liquid. This is a synthetic enzyme cocktail designed to target and neutralize designer bioweapons. We've tested it on animals with mixed results. In humans, he paused. We've used it once. The patient survived but experienced massive cellular damage, kidney failure, neurological deficits, chronic pain. But they survived. Technically, Emma studied the vials. The liquid inside seemed to shimmer slightly, like it was alive. What's the mechanism? It floods the system with artificial enzymes that bind to foreign compounds and mark them for elimination. Think of it as a smart bomb for toxins. But it can't always distinguish between harmful agents and healthy tissue. Sometimes it attacks both. So you're asking me to poison him with a cure that might be worse than the disease. Kelso's expression didn't change. I'm asking you to make a command decision. Webb dies in 6 to 8 hours without intervention. With this treatment, he might survive. Or he might wish he hadn't. Emma felt the weight of the choice settling on her shoulders. The same weight she'd felt in Mosul when she'd had to decide whether a 13-year-old kid was a threat or a victim. The same weight that had ended her military career and started 3 years of running from who she used to be. Has he been informed? She asked. He's not conscious enough to consent. Then we don't do it. James stepped forward. Emma, no. She turned to face him. You don't get to make that call. I don't get to make that call. Only Webb does. And if he can't consent, then we keep him comfortable and we keep trying conventional methods until either he improves or he's conscious enough to choose. He'll be dead before he regains consciousness. Then he dies with dignity instead of being experimented on without permission. Kelso made a frustrated sound. Captain, with all due respect, this is war. We don't always get the luxury of informed consent. Sometimes command has to make hard choices. I know all about hard choices. Emma's voice went cold. I made one 3 years ago that cost 12 lives. I've spent every day since then learning to live with it. You want to add Webb's suffering to my list? You want me to poison a soldier who can't say no because it might produce data that helps the next victim? Find someone else. The room went silent. Martinez stood near the door, looking like he wanted to disappear. Park had gone pale. Kelso just stared at her with the calculating expression of someone running equations that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with acceptable losses. James was the one who spoke. What if Webb had already given consent? Emma frowned. What do you mean? James pulled out his phone and brought up a video file. Every operator in special operations signs an advance directive before deployment. Medical procedures to attempt, life support preferences, experimental treatment authorization. He hit play. The screen showed Captain Marcus Webb in uniform, sitting in what looked like a base medical office. He looked healthy, alert, nothing like the dying man in the bed behind her. Captain Marcus Webb, service number 445-873392, the video version said. In the event of catastrophic injury or exposure to chemical or biological agents, I authorize all experimental medical interventions deemed necessary by command medical staff, including but not limited to unapproved pharmaceuticals, surgical procedures, and treatments with unknown long-term effects. I understand the risks and accept them as part of my duty. The video ended. Emma stared at the phone. When was this recorded? 18 months ago. Standard procedure. It's a blanket authorization. He didn't consent to this specific treatment. It's legally binding consent for any experimental treatment deemed medically necessary. James pocketed his phone. Which means the choice is yours, Captain. Medical officer on site. You have the authority to approve or deny. Emma looked at Webb, at the man who'd signed away his right to refuse treatment because he'd believed in something bigger than himself, who'd walked into a building full of death and breathed poison so his team could complete their mission, who was dying now because evil people built evil weapons and someone had to stop them. She thought about the vials in Park's case, about the chance they represented, about all the ways good intentions could lead to suffering worse than death. Then she thought about what Webb would want. Not as a lawyer would define consent, but as a soldier would understand duty. Give me the vials, she said. Kelso hesitated. Are you sure? No, but I'm certain that if Webb could speak right now, he'd tell us to take the shot. So that's what we're going to do. She looked at James. But if this goes wrong, if he survives but lives in agony, I'm the one who tells him why. Not you, not Kelso, me. And I'm the one who lives with it. James nodded slowly. Understood. Emma took the first vial from the case and held it up to the light. The blue liquid inside seemed to pulse, though that might have been her imagination. She'd administered 1,000 different drugs in her career, had pushed medications that stopped hearts so surgeons could repair them, drugs that paralyzed muscles so ventilators could breathe, chemicals that walked the line between healing and harm. But she'd never injected something that felt this much like a gamble. Martinez, she said, I need a central line kit, 2 IV pumps, and a crash cart on standby. Dr. Holland, she turned. Holland stood in the doorway, pale but steady. I'm staying, he said before she could ask. You might need help. Emma wanted to tell him this wasn't his fight, wanted to protect him from what came next. But the truth was she might need help, and Holland had already proven he wouldn't run when things got ugly. Okay, she turned back to Webb. Let's get him ready. The next 30 minutes moved like a choreographed dance. Emma prepped the central line while Martinez assembled the IV pumps. Kelso talked her through the dosing protocol, 3 vials administered sequentially, with specific timing to prevent the enzymes from overwhelming Webb's system faster than his body could process them. First vial goes slow, Kelso said. 10 minutes minimum. Watch for any sign of anaphylaxis, throat swelling, blood pressure drop, cardiac arrhythmia. If you see any of those, stop immediately and push epinephrine. Got it. Emma connected the first vial to the IV line and started the pump. The blue liquid began its journey into Webb's bloodstream. For the first minute, nothing happened. His vitals stayed stable. His breathing remained labored but consistent. Emma watched the monitors with the focused intensity of someone defusing a bomb, because that's essentially what this was. Controlled demolition of the toxins, killing him from inside. 2 minutes. Still stable. 3 minutes. His heart rate ticked up slightly. Not alarming yet, but something to watch. 4 minutes. Blood pressure wavered. Emma's hand moved to the epinephrine syringe, ready. 5 minutes. Webb's eyes shot open. He sucked in a breath that sounded like drowning in reverse. Every muscle in his body went rigid. The monitors exploded into chaos, alarms screaming, numbers spiking, lines that should have been steady turning into seismograph readings of a body at war with itself. "Hold him down!" Emma shouted. Martinez grabbed Webb's shoulders as the soldier started to convulse. Holland moved to his legs, trying to prevent him from kicking free of the IV lines. Webb's eyes found Emma, locked on her with an intensity that was equal parts pain and fury. His mouth moved, but no sound came out except a raw wheeze that might have been a scream if he'd had the air for it. "Stay with me," Emma said, abandoning the pump to grab his face. "Captain Webb, look at me. Stay with me. This is the treatment. This is what saves you. You have to ride it out." His pupils were blown wide, all black, no color. His skin had gone from gray to a mottled red that suggested every capillary in his body was dilating at once. The heart monitor showed a rhythm that was racing toward VTAC territory. Emma made a split-second decision. She stopped the pump. Better to pause the treatment than lose the patient. "Kelso, is this normal?" she demanded. The specialist was checking his tablet, scrolling through data with the calm of someone who'd expected this. Within parameters. His body is fighting the treatment. The enzymes are triggering an immune response. He's tachycardic and his BP is bottoming out. That's not an immune response, that's shock. "It'll pass. Resume the infusion." Like hell. Emma reached for the epinephrine. Webb's eyes were starting to roll back. He was going to code. James grabbed her wrist. "Trust the protocol." "The protocol is killing him. The protocol is saving him. Look at his liver enzymes." Emma glanced at the monitor showing real-time blood work analysis. The numbers were dropping. Not slowly, dropping fast, like someone had opened a drain and everything toxic was flooding out. "His body is processing the compound," James said. "The reaction you're seeing is the treatment working. If you stop now, the toxins will rebound and he'll die anyway." Emma stared at Webb, at his blown pupils and mottled skin and the way his body shook, like it was trying to tear itself apart. She'd seen people die. Had seen them die slow and die fast and die in ways that made you question whether survival was always the better option. But she'd also seen people fight. Seen them endure pain that should have broken them and come out the other side still human, still whole, still worth the suffering it took to get there. "Resume the infusion," she said, releasing the epinephrine. "But if his heart stops, we're done. I'm not bringing him back just to torture him again." She restarted the pump. The blue liquid continued its crawl into Webb's veins. His convulsions intensified for a moment, then began to subside. Slowly, like a storm blowing itself out. By minute 8, his heart rate had stabilized. By minute 9, his blood pressure was climbing back toward normal. By minute 10, when the first vial emptied, his eyes had focused again and the mottling on his skin was fading to pink. Emma pulled the empty vial and loaded the second one. "How long between doses?" 5 minutes, Kelso said. "Let his system equilibrate." Those 5 minutes felt longer than the entire firefight earlier. Emma stayed at Webb's bedside, monitoring every flicker of his vitals, every shift in his breathing. He was conscious now, sort of, aware enough to track movement, but not responsive enough to speak. "You're doing good," she told him, though she had no idea if that was true. 2 more doses. Then we wait and see if this worked." Webb's eyes met hers, held. She saw something in them, not gratitude, not fear. Recognition, maybe. The look one soldier gives another when they're both trapped in a situation neither of them chose, but both of them have to survive. The second vial went better than the first. Less convulsions, less cardiovascular chaos. By the time it finished, Webb's liver enzymes had dropped another 30%, and his kidney function was showing signs of recovery. The third vial was almost anticlimactic. His body had figured out what was happening, had stopped fighting the treatment and started working with it. When it finished, Webb's eyes were clear and his breathing was almost normal. Emma disconnected the IV and stepped back. Her hands were shaking. Adrenaline crash. She'd been running on pure focus for the last hour, and now that it was over, her body was reminding her that she was human, and humans had limits. "He'll need monitoring for the next 48 hours, Kelso said, packing up his equipment. "But the acute crisis is over. If he's stable for the next 6 hours, we can transport him to a proper facility." Emma nodded. Couldn't find words. Just nodded. Holland touched her shoulder. "You did it. We did it." She looked at him. "You stayed. Most people would have run. Most people aren't trained for this." Holland glanced around the trauma room, at the bullet holes and bloodstains that janitorial would spend hours trying to remove. "Neither am I, apparently, but I'm learning." James approached from where he'd been standing near the back wall. "Captain Voss." A word. Emma followed him out into the hallway. The building was quieter now. The operators had secured the perimeter and were conducting post-incident sweeps. EMTs were treating minor injuries. Local PD was documenting the scene, the machine of emergency response grinding through its procedures. "You saved his life," James said once they were alone. "I gambled with his life. There's a difference." "You made the right call. I made a call. Whether it was right won't be clear for days or weeks, or however long it takes to know if those enzymes are going to cause permanent damage." James was quiet for a moment. Then, "I meant what I said earlier about being wrong, about you." Emma leaned against the wall. Every muscle in her body ached. "Doesn't matter now. It matters to me." "Then write it in a letter and mail it to someone who cares." The words came out harsher than she intended, but she was too tired to soften them. "You got what you wanted. Webb's alive. I'll monitor him for the next 48 hours like we agreed. Then I'm done. And after that I go back to my life and you go back to yours. Is that really what you want?" James studied her with that analytical stare. "Earlier, when you were treating Webb, you were completely in your element. This is what you're good at, Emma. Saving people in impossible situations. Making calls no one else can make. You could come back, full reinstatement. I could get you assigned to any unit you wanted." Emma closed her eyes. For a second, just a second, she let herself imagine it. Walking into a briefing room in uniform, having her expertise respected instead of questioned, working with people who understood what she'd been through instead of civilians who thought war was something that happened on TV. Then she opened her eyes and saw the bullet holes in the wall, smelled the copper tang of blood that no amount of cleaning would fully remove. Heard the echo of gunfire and screams, and the sound of her own voice giving orders that led to people bleeding on linoleum. "No," she said. "This isn't my element. War zones aren't my element. This is just muscle memory, reflexes, the parts of me that won't let go no matter how hard I try. Maybe they won't let go because you need them. I don't need to be a soldier. I need to be someone who doesn't have to make decisions about who lives and who dies based on incomplete information and impossible timelines." James looked like he wanted to argue. Then his phone buzzed. He checked it, frowned, and his entire demeanor shifted. "What?" Emma asked. "Problem." He pulled up something on his screen. Webb's blood analysis just came back from the CDC. The bioweapon compound. It's not just a random cocktail of toxins. "What is it?" "It's a delivery system." James turned the phone so she could see. The image showed a molecular structure that looked like something out of a nightmare. Complex, symmetrical, definitely engineered. The toxins were just the vehicle. Underneath them was something else, something that's been incubating in Webb's system since exposure. Emma felt ice water flood her veins. Incubating. The CDC thinks it's a targeted pathogen, designed to replicate slowly, spread asymptomatically, and then activate on command. James's voice was grim. Webb isn't just a victim, he's a carrier. And if this thing goes active while he's in a civilian hospital... He didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Emma looked back toward Trauma 1, where Captain Webb was lying in a bed recovering from one nightmare, completely unaware that he was carrying another one inside him. "How long until activation?" she asked. James checked his phone again. "Unknown. Could be hours. Could be days. The pathogen is dormant right now, but the CDC detected trace amounts of a chemical timer in his bloodstream. Once it reaches critical concentration, it triggers. And everyone in this hospital becomes a potential infection vector. Emma pushed off the wall. Her exhaustion vanished, replaced by the cold clarity of emergency response protocols snapping back into place. We need to evacuate, full quarantine, get everyone out who isn't already exposed. Already in motion, but we have a problem. James pulled up a schematic of the hospital. The evacuation routes are compromised. The explosions damaged 2 stairwells and the main elevators are offline. We've got roughly 200 people in this building, including patients who can't be moved easily. How long do we have? Best case? 6 hours before the pathogen activates. Worst case? James met her eyes. It could already be spreading. Emma stared at the schematic, her mind already running through containment protocols she'd learned in hazmat training a decade ago. 6 hours. Maybe less. 200 people who had no idea they might be carrying death in their lungs. The CDC team, she said. Where are they? 20 minutes out, but they're bringing containment equipment for a small exposure incident, not a full hospital lockdown. James closed the schematic. We need to start triage now. Identify who's been in direct contact with Webb, isolate them, and pray the pathogen hasn't aerosolized yet. It's already aerosolized, Emma pointed back toward Trauma 1. He's been breathing for hours. Anyone who walked through that corridor, anyone who stood in that room, they're exposed. Including you. The words hit like a physical blow. Emma felt her throat tighten, not from fear, but from the sudden realization that she'd been so focused on saving Webb that she hadn't considered what might be crawling through her own bloodstream right now. Including me, she agreed. Holland, Martinez, Amy, Kelso, Park. Everyone who helped treat him. James's expression hardened into the mask he wore when calculating acceptable losses. Then we contain the contaminated zone to this wing, nobody in or out. The rest of the hospital evacuates through the west corridors. That leaves us trapped here with a biological time bomb. That keeps it from spreading to the entire city. Emma wanted to argue, wanted to find the loophole, the alternative, the tactical genius solution that saved everyone. But her training wouldn't let her ignore the math. 10 potentially infected people sealed in one wing was better than 200 infected people scattered across Boston. Okay, she said, we locked down the trauma wing, but I need supplies. Antivirals, broad-spectrum antibiotics, whatever the CDC recommends for unknown pathogen exposure. If we're going to be quarantined, we need a fighting chance. I'll have it brought to the decon barrier. Anything else? Emma thought fast. Portable air filtration units, IV equipment, enough food and water for 72 hours. And hazmat suits, not the cheap ones, full positive pressure gear. Done. James was already typing orders into his phone. 30 minutes. Make it 20. He looked up. Why? Because Webb's heart rate just spiked again. Emma could see the monitor readings from where she stood. Whatever's incubating inside him, it's waking up. James swore and followed her back into Trauma 1. Webb was conscious now, eyes tracking movement, but something was wrong. His breathing had changed, shallow, rapid, like his lungs couldn't get enough air. The grayish tinge was creeping back into his skin despite the improved liver numbers. Martinez stood near the bed, medical tablet in hand. His O2 sats are dropping. 94, 92. I don't understand. His airway is clear, lungs sound fine. It's not his lungs. Emma grabbed the tablet and pulled up his blood work trending. The pathogen markers that had been barely detectable an hour ago were climbing exponentially, doubling every 15 minutes. It's binding to his hemoglobin, preventing oxygen transfer at the cellular level. Holland appeared in the doorway, face pale. That's carbon monoxide poisoning, but there's no source. The pathogen is the source. Emma turned to James. It's designed to mimic CO poisoning, make the victim hypoxic without any visible respiratory distress. By the time symptoms show, it's too late to treat conventionally. So what do we do? Holland's voice cracked slightly. Hyperbaric oxygen? We don't have a chamber. Emma looked back at Webb. His lips were turning blue. And even if we did, it wouldn't work. This isn't real CO poisoning. The pathogen's molecular structure blocks oxygen-binding sites. More O2 won't help. We need to break the bond. James moved to her side. How? I don't know. The admission tasted like failure. This is engineered beyond anything I've seen. Whoever designed this knew exactly what they were doing. Then we're just supposed to watch him suffocate? Emma's hands curled into fists. She'd spent 3 years learning to accept that some patients couldn't be saved. That medicine had limits, that sometimes the best you could do was hold someone's hand while they died. But watching Webb struggle for air after everything they'd done to keep him alive felt like surrendering to something that didn't deserve to win. "No," she said. "We buy time. Martinez, get me sodium bicarbonate and glucose. High-dose IV push. We're going to force his metabolism to compensate. That's not a real treatment. It's the only treatment we have." Emma was already drawing up the medications. "His cells can't get oxygen from hemoglobin, so we give them an alternative energy pathway. Flood his system with glucose to fuel anaerobic respiration. The bicarb helps buffer the lactic acid buildup." Holland stepped forward. "That might work for minutes, maybe an hour. But you can't sustain anaerobic metabolism indefinitely. His organs will start failing again." "I know." Emma pushed the medications through Webb's IV. "But the CDC team is 20 minutes out. We just need to keep him alive that long." Webb's hand moved suddenly, grabbing her wrist. His grip was weak but insistent. Emma looked down at him. His eyes were wide, terrified but also determined, trying to communicate something. "What?" she asked quietly. His mouth moved. No sound at first, just shaped air. Then a whisper so faint she had to lean close to hear it. "Caracas? Lab? Vault?" "Don't talk," Emma said. "Save your strength." But Webb shook his head, still gripping her wrist. "Vault? Combination? In my blood." Emma frowned. "Your blood?" "Genetic? Marker?" Each word cost him. Pathogen. Carries. Data. Understanding crashed over her like cold water. The bioweapon wasn't just a weapon. It was a data storage system. Encoded information hidden inside a biological carrier that would die if anyone tried to extract it conventionally. "The vault combination is embedded in the pathogen's DNA," she said slowly. "That's why they kept you alive. That's why they sent contractors to retrieve you instead of just killing you in Caracas." Webb's grip loosened. His eyes started to flutter closed. "Stay with me." Emma checked his vitals. Oxygen saturation at 88 and dropping. "James, he's coding. Get me the crash cart." But James wasn't moving. He stood frozen, staring at Webb with an expression Emma had never seen on him before, something between shock and rage. "He swallowed a data capsule," James said quietly. "Before the exposure, standard protocol for sensitive intel. But if the pathogen is encoded with the vault combination, then killing the pathogen kills the intel." Emma understood now. The toxin exposure wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. They infected him with something that would force us to keep him alive while they tried to extract him. And we brought him right to them. James pulled out his phone. "The contractors who hit this hospital, they weren't trying to kill Webb. They were trying to take him to someone who could decode the pathogen and access whatever's in that vault." "What's in the vault?" James met her eyes. "If I told you, I'd have to kill you." He wasn't joking. Emma turned back to Webb. His breathing was barely perceptible now. The monitors were screaming warnings that everyone in the room already understood. He was dying, and they were losing the intel with him. "There has to be a way to extract the data without killing him," she said. "The CDC might know. They're 15 minutes out. He doesn't have 15 minutes. Holland cleared his throat. "Actually, there might be something." Everyone looked at him. The doctor seemed to shrink under their attention, but pushed forward anyway. "The portable DNA sequencer in the research lab. 3rd floor. We use it for rapid genetic testing on infectious disease patients. If we could get a blood sample, sequence the pathogen in real time, we could read the encoded data directly from his bloodstream," Emma finished, "without killing the pathogen or the patient." James was already moving. "Where's the lab?" "North corridor, room 317, but it's locked. You'd need—" "I'll get it open." James gestured to 2 of his operators. "Lopez, Williams, with me. Captain Voss, keep Webb stable." "Wait." Emma caught his arm. "If you're exposed to the pathogen, then I'm exposed. Not the first time I've walked into a hot zone." James pulled free gently. "Do your job." I'll do mine. He left at a run, operators trailing behind him. The room felt smaller without his presence. Emma looked at the monitors, at Webb's fading vitals, at the countdown clock in her head that was ticking towards 0. "Martinez," she said, "how much glucose do we have left?" "2 bags, maybe 3. Get them all. And find me every vasopressor in this building. We're going to keep his pressure up by force if we have to." Holland moved to Webb's other side, checking pupil response. He's starting to lose consciousness. If his brain isn't getting oxygen, I know. Emma didn't need the reminder. Hypoxic brain injury started at 4 minutes. They were already past 3. But if we intubate him, we risk spreading the pathogen through the ventilation system. So we let him suffocate? We let him hover right on the edge until James gets back with that sequencer. Amy appeared in the doorway, arms full of IV bags. Her earlier fear had been replaced by grim focus. "I brought everything from the pharmacy. Also some experimental drugs from the research lockup. I figured if there was ever a time to break protocol, this is it." Emma could have kissed her. "What did you get? Methylene blue, hydroxycobalamin, some stuff I can't even pronounce." Amy set the bags on the counter. "Dr. Reeves in research said methylene blue can help with methemoglobinemia. I don't know if that's the same as what he has. It's not, but it might work anyway." Emma grabbed the methylene blue. "It's an electron carrier. Could provide an alternative pathway for cellular respiration." "Or it could kill him," Holland said. "So could doing nothing." Emma drew up the dose. "Webb, if you can hear me, we're trying something experimental. Again, you really need to stop being such a high-maintenance patient." Webb's lips twitched. Might have been a smile. Might have been a seizure starting. Emma pushed the methylene blue. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then Webb's skin started to change. Not improving, but shifting. The gray took on a bluish tint that looked wrong, artificial, like someone had photoshopped his color balance. "That's the methylene blue circulating," Holland said. "It's normal. Doesn't mean it's working." But then Webb's oxygen saturation ticked up. 89, 90, 92. "It's working," Amy breathed. Emma didn't celebrate. The number was rising but slowly, fighting against the pathogen's oxygen blockade, like trying to fill a bathtub with a teaspoon while someone else held the drain open. They'd bought time. Maybe 10 minutes. Maybe less. An explosion rocked the building. Not close. Somewhere in the north wing. But close enough that the lights flickered and dust rained from the ceiling tiles. The monitors hiccuped, went dark for a second, then switched to battery backup. "What the hell was that?" Martinez grabbed the bed rail to steady himself. Emma was already moving to the window. Outside, she could see smoke rising from the north side of the hospital. Black smoke. Chemical fire. The kind that came from someone deliberately destroying evidence. "James," she said, pulling out the phone he'd given her earlier. She dialed. It rang once, twice, then went to voicemail. "James, if you can hear this, get out of there. The north wing." The phone cut off. No signal. Emma checked the display. Jammed. Someone was blocking communications. "They're still here," she said quietly. "The contractors. They're destroying the sequencer." Holland's face went white. "If the sequencer's gone, then we can't decode the pathogen, can't access the vault, can't extract the intel." Emma felt the tactical situation collapsing. "And Webb becomes useless to everyone, which means they'll come to finish the job." Martinez moved to the door, hand on his sidearm. "We need to evacuate." "To where?" "The whole wing is contaminated. The exits are probably already sealed." Emma looked at Webb. He was stable for now, but the methylene blue was a temporary fix. His body was still fighting a war it couldn't win without intervention they no longer had access to. Another explosion, closer this time. The building shook hard enough that equipment toppled. Amy grabbed the IV stand before it fell. Holland caught a monitor that had come loose from its mount. Through the observation window, Emma could see smoke beginning to fill the corridor. Not from fire. From tear gas grenades, standard room clearing technique. Force the targets out where you can pick them off. "Tactical retreat," Emma said. She grabbed the portable monitor, disconnected it from the wall mount. "Martinez, can you carry Webb? He's got 3 IV lines and a catheter. I'll manage the lines. Just get him mobile." Martinez didn't argue. He released the bed brakes and started pushing toward the door. Emma gathered the IV bags, looping them over the bed rail, checking connections. Holland grabbed the medication bags. Amy took the portable oxygen tank. They made it 5 feet into the corridor before the shooting started. Gunfire from the north end. Not the controlled 3-round bursts of military operators. Longer bursts. Spray and pray. The contractors were back, and they weren't trying for surgical precision anymore. Emma shoved Webb's bed into a recessed doorway, using it as cover. Bullets chewed through the walls where they'd been standing seconds before. Martinez dropped low, drawing his sidearm. Holland and Amy pressed against the wall, frozen. "East stairwell," Emma said. 30 feet. We move fast, we move together. Nobody stops. "They'll cut us down," Holland said. "They'll cut us down if we stay here too." Emma checked Webb's lines. Still intact. His oxygen sat was dropping again. 90, 88, 86. The methylene blue was wearing off faster than she'd hoped. On 3. She didn't get to 3. The overhead sprinklers erupted. Not water. Something thicker, with a chemical smell that burned her sinuses. Emma's combat instinct screamed at her. "Chemical agent, get to cover, seal your airways." But there was nowhere to go and nothing to seal with. "Dispersant," she said through clenched teeth. "They're trying to aerosolize the pathogen. Spread it faster." Holland grabbed his throat, gasping. Amy was coughing, tears streaming down her face. Martinez fired 3 shots down the corridor, then ducked back, wiping his eyes. Emma's vision blurred. The chemical wasn't just a dispersant. It was affecting her nervous system. Muscle relaxant, maybe? Or a fast-acting sedative. Her legs felt heavy. Her thoughts were getting sluggish. Webb made a sound. A rattling gasp that meant his airway was compromised. Emma tried to move to him, but her body wouldn't respond properly. She watched his oxygen saturation drop, 80, 75, 70, and couldn't do anything about it. The shooting stopped. Footsteps approached. Multiple people. Moving with the deliberate calm of professionals who knew their targets were already neutralized. A man appeared through the chemical haze, late 40s, gray hair, wearing a respirator that made him look like an insect. He surveyed the scene with the dispassion of someone evaluating livestock. "Captain Webb," he said, voice muffled by the mask, "you've been very difficult to recover. I hope you appreciate the effort we've gone through." Webb didn't respond. Couldn't respond. His lips were blue again, eyes closed. The man turned to Emma. "And you must be the nurse who's been keeping him alive. Good work. Very professional. Unfortunately, we can't have witnesses." Emma tried to speak, managed a slurred sound that might have been a curse. The man smiled behind his respirator. "Don't worry, the sedative isn't fatal. You'll just sleep through what comes next. Consider it a mercy." He gestured to his team. 2 contractors moved forward, grabbing Webb's bed. They started pushing it toward the north corridor, toward the smoke and the destroyed sequencer, and whatever black site facility was waiting to extract every secret Webb carried. Emma's vision darkened at the edges. She fought to stay conscious, fought the sedative flooding her system, fought the muscle relaxant turning her limbs to lead. She'd been in bad situations before, had survived worse, but never while chemically paralyzed and watching someone she'd worked so hard to save being dragged toward a fate worse than death. Her hand found something. Cold metal. The fire extinguisher she'd used earlier, lying where it had fallen during the evacuation attempt. Her fingers were numb, but she forced them to close around it. The man in the respirator turned to leave. Emma used every ounce of strength she had left to swing the extinguisher. It caught him in the knee. He went down hard, surprised more than injured. "Shoot her," he snapped. A contractor raised his weapon. Emma couldn't move anymore, couldn't dodge, could only watch the gun barrel track toward her face, and wonder if being shot while sedated would hurt less than dying fully conscious. The shot never came. Instead, the contractor's head snapped to the side. He dropped. Emma's chemically fogged brain tried to process what had happened. Sniper shot? Impossible. They were inside, no clean line of sight. Another contractor fell, then a third. Not shots. Something else. Something silent. Through the chemical haze, a figure emerged, moving low, fast, controlled. Not wearing a respirator, not affected by the sedative. James Voss, face covered by an improvised cloth mask soaked in what smelled like alcohol, moving like death incarnate. He closed on the first contractor before the man could react. Knife strike to the throat. Brutal. Efficient. The kind of close-quarters combat they didn't teach in boot camp because it was too ugly for official doctrine. The man in the respirator scrambled backward, reaching for a sidearm. James kicked it away, then drove his knee into the man's solar plexus. The respirator cracked. Chemical haze flooded in. The man gasped, then started convulsing as his own weapon turned against him. James didn't watch him die. He was already moving to Webb's bed, checking vitals, assessing the situation with the rapid calculation of someone who'd run 1,000 battlefield triage scenarios. "Emma," he said. His voice sounded far away. "Stay with me." Emma tried to respond, managed a weak nod. Her body felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The sedative was winning. James grabbed her face, forcing her to focus on him. "How long does the sedative last?" "Don't know." "Best guess. 20 minutes? Maybe?" "You don't have 20 minutes? Webb doesn't have 20 minutes." James pulled something from his vest. A syringe. "Adrenaline. Pure. It'll counteract the sedative, but it's going to hurt like hell." Emma tried to shake her head. Couldn't. Just whispered, "Do it." He injected the adrenaline directly into her carotid. The effect was instant and agonizing. Every nerve in her body caught fire. Her heart rate spiked from sedated slow to hummingbird fast in 3 seconds. She sucked in a breath that felt like inhaling broken glass. But she could move. James helped her stand. "The sequencer's destroyed. North Wing is a write-off, but I got this first." He held up a hard drive. "Downloaded all the genetic data we had on the pathogen before they blew the lab. It's not complete, but it might be enough." Emma's brain was moving faster now, the adrenaline burning through the sedative's fog. "We need processing power, analysis software. The CDC team is here. They've set up a mobile lab in the parking lot. We're quarantined, can't leave the wing. The quarantine's compromised anyway. They used a chemical dispersant. The pathogen's aerosolized now, probably spreading through the entire HVAC system." Emma looked at Webb. His monitor showed oxygen saturation at 68, brain damage territory. They were out of time and out of options. "Get him to the CDC," she said. Her words came out too fast, heart racing from the adrenaline. "I'll stay here. Someone needs to coordinate evacuation of the exposed staff. You're coming with us." "I'm exposed. I'm contaminated. I stay." James grabbed her shoulders. "You're the only person who's kept Webb alive this long. If he codes during transport, the CDC won't know what to do. They need you. Then they're going to be disappointed." Emma pulled free. Her hands were shaking from the adrenaline, but her voice was steady. "I'm not leaving Amy, Holland, Martinez. They got exposed trying to save your soldier. Someone has to make sure they survive this." "Emma, it's not a discussion, Colonel." She used his rank deliberately. Remind her that this was a military operation, and he could give orders, but she could refuse them. "Get Webb to safety. Extract the intel. Win your war. I'll handle mine." For a moment, they just stared at each other. The same impasse they'd been locked in for 3 years. Him trying to order her into doing what he thought was right. Her refusing to be anyone's soldier, but her own. Then the building shook again. Bigger explosion this time. The ceiling cracked. Chunks of plaster rained down. "They're destroying evidence," James said. "If we don't move now, we'll be buried in the rubble." Emma looked at Webb one last time. At the man who'd carried a bioweapon in his blood because someone decided winning was worth any cost. At the soldier who'd trusted her to save him without knowing she was the same person who'd once hesitated to pull a trigger and paid for it ever since. "Go," she said to James, "before I change my mind." James hesitated for one more second. Then he nodded to Martinez. "Help me move him." They got Webb's bed rolling toward the east stairwell. James paused at the threshold, looked back at Emma standing in the chemical haze with her shaking hands and racing heart. 48 hours, he said. "Then we're coming back for you. Don't bother." He left anyway. Martinez with him. The sound of Webb's bed rattling down the corridor faded into distance. Emma stood alone in the contaminated wing, feeling the pathogen in her lungs, the adrenaline burning through her system too fast, the building coming apart around her. Holland appeared from behind an overturned gurney, coughing but conscious. "Did they make it out?" "Yeah." "What about us?" Emma looked at the broken ceiling, the chemical fog, the bodies of contractors who'd been willing to kill dozens to retrieve one piece of intelligence. She thought about her father leaving with the intel that might save thousands, but definitely wouldn't save the people trapped here with her. "We survive," she said, "or we don't. But we do it on our terms." Amy stumbled out of a side room, face pale, eyes streaming from the chemical exposure. "I can't breathe right. Something's wrong." Emma moved to her, checked her airways, felt the subtle wheeze that meant the pathogen had taken hold. She had maybe an hour before Amy's oxygen saturation started dropping like Webb's had. Maybe less for Holland, who was older, whose system would fight the infection less effectively. The CDC team was outside, had treatments, protocols, containment, but they were on the wrong side of a quarantine barrier Emma couldn't cross without spreading the pathogen further. Unless she looked at the contaminated corridor, at the chemical dispersant still dripping from the sprinklers, at the evidence of a firefight that would take investigators weeks to piece together. "Amy," she said, "how much methylene blue is left in the pharmacy?" "I brought everything, maybe 10 vials?" "Get them, and every IV pump that still works. We're setting up a field hospital right here." Holland grabbed her arm. "Emma, we need evacuation, not improvisation. We need the CDC itrukol. The CDC can't help us until we can prove we're not contagious, which means we need to kill the pathogen, or at least suppress it enough that we're not walking biohazards." Emma pulled free, moved to the nurse's station. The computer was still functional, running on battery backup. She pulled up the hospital's ventilation system controls. "But first we need to contain this wing completely. No air exchange with the rest of the building. You'll suffocate everyone inside, or I'll stop the pathogen from spreading to every patient in this hospital." Emma started shutting down air handlers, closing dampers, isolating the trauma wing from the main system. "Your choice, doctor. Help me or get out of my way." Holland stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved to her side and started helping with the controls. "You're insane," he said. "Probably." Emma closed the last damper. The trauma wing was now sealed, a tomb or a lifeboat, depending on whether they could survive the next few hours. "But I'm the insane person keeping you alive, so try to be grateful." The building shook again, closer this time. Emma looked up at the ceiling and saw cracks spreading like spiderwebs across the plaster. The contractors were demolishing the entire north wing, erasing every trace of what had happened here, which meant they were running out of time faster than she'd calculated. Amy returned with the methylene blue and IV supplies. Emma started setting up stations, one for each person who'd been exposed. Holland helped organize the equipment. They moved with the strange efficiency that comes from shared disaster. No wasted motion, no unnecessary conversation, just the grim focus of people trying not to die. "How long can we hold out?" Amy asked as Emma inserted her IV. Emma didn't answer, because the truth was she didn't know. The methylene blue would buy time, but not solve the problem. The pathogen was still spreading through their systems, still binding oxygen, still shutting down cellular respiration, still moving toward the activation point where it would either kill them or transform them into carriers. The monitor beside her beeped, her own heart rate displayed on screen. 140. Too fast. The adrenaline was fading, but her system was still redlined, fighting infection and sedative, and the cumulative stress of a day that had started with her being kicked out of a trauma bay and had somehow ended with her barricaded in that same bay, trying not to become a biological weapon. Holland finished his own IV setup and moved to the window. "They're evacuating the rest of the hospital. I can see people leaving through the west exits." "Good." Emma adjusted Amy's drip rate. "That's 200 fewer people we have to worry about." "And how many people trapped in here with us?" Emma did the math. 7 nurses, 3 orderlies, 2 doctors, me, 13 total. Unlucky number. Only if you're superstitious. Another explosion. The lights died completely this time. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in red. Emma's shadow stretched across the wall like something from a nightmare. Through the sealed doors, she could hear screaming, other staff members who hadn't made it to the evacuation points, who were trapped in corridors filling with smoke and chemical fog. "We have to help them," Amy said. "We can't." Emma's voice came out harder than she intended. "We open those doors, we expose them to the pathogen. They die anyway, just slower. So we just let them reach the evacuation points on their own. That's what they're trained for. That's what the drills are for." Emma turned back to the monitors. Her oxygen saturation was at 94. Still functional, but dropping. The pathogen was gaining ground. Right now, we focus on keeping ourselves alive. That's the mission. Amy looked like she wanted to argue, but then her own monitor beeped a warning. Oxygen sat at 92. She paled, looked at the numbers, and closed her mouth. The screaming stopped. Emma told herself it was because they'd made it to safety, but she'd heard enough death in her life to recognize its particular silence. Holland moved away from the window. The CDC team is setting up larger containment outside. Looks like they're preparing for mass casualties. They're preparing for us to fail. Emma checked the methylene blue supply. 6 vials left. Not enough for the whole night, let alone the 48 hours James had promised. We need a better solution. Such as? Emma pulled out the phone James had given her. Still jammed, but the data connection was weak, not dead. She pulled up the research files she'd downloaded earlier when she should have been restocking gauze. Files on bioweapon countermeasures, experimental protocols, treatments that existed only in classified documents and laboratory fantasies. One file caught her attention. Protein synthesis inhibitor, experimental, used successfully on engineered pathogens in animal trials. Side effects included nausea, temporary paralysis, possible organ damage, all better than death. I need to make a call, she said. The lines are jammed. Not all of them. Emma moved to the hospital's internal communication system, the physical landlines, ancient copper wires that predated cellular jamming. She picked up the receiver and dialed the research lab. It rang 4 times. She was about to hang up when someone answered. This is Dr. Reeves. The voice sounded annoyed. If this is about the evacuation, I already told security. Dr. Reeves, this is Emma Voss from the trauma wing. I need you to listen very carefully because I'm only going to say this once. Who? The nurse who saved your research samples last month when the freezer failed. You owe me. I'm collecting. A pause. What do you need? You have an experimental protein synthesis inhibitor in your lab. Compound designation RSI 447. I need you to tell me how to synthesize it from materials available in a standard hospital pharmacy. That compound isn't approved for human use. The side effects, I'm aware of the side effects. I'm also aware that 13 people are going to die in this wing if I don't do something. So either help me or explain to the review board why you let us all die when you had a possible solution. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, you'll need cyclohexane, sodium hydroxide, and ethyl acetate. Also access to a centrifuge and a pH meter. Do you have those? I'll find them. Walk me through it. For the next 20 minutes, Dr. Reeves talked Emma through a synthesis process that violated about 17 FDA regulations and probably a few laws of chemistry. Holland helped, his medical knowledge translating Reeves's academic jargon into practical steps. Amy ran between the pharmacy and the supply closets, gathering ingredients that were never meant to be combined outside a proper laboratory. The building kept shaking, kept falling apart. Emma worked through it, measuring, mixing, adjusting pH levels with strips meant for urine analysis. It was the most terrifying chemistry experiment of her life, and she'd once helped disarm a chemical bomb in Baghdad. Final step, Reeves said over the phone. Add the sodium hydroxide dropwise. If the solution turns green, you've succeeded. If it turns brown, evacuate immediately because you've created something toxic. Emma added the sodium hydroxide. 1 drop, 2 drops, 3. The solution turned green. We're good, she said. That doesn't mean it's safe, Reeves warned. This is entirely experimental. I have no data on human tolerance. You could be creating a cure or a poison. Story of my life. Emma hung up and held the beaker up to the red emergency lighting. The green liquid inside looked like something from a sci-fi movie. Everyone get ready. We're about to find out if I'm a genius or a mass murderer. Holland stared at the beaker. You're serious? As a heart attack. This is insane. I know. Emma drew the liquid into a syringe. But I'm out of sane options. Amy, you're first. Why me? Because you're youngest. Best chance of surviving if this goes wrong. Emma moved to Amy's IV line. Last chance to back out. Amy looked at her oxygen saturation, 90 now, and shook her head. Do it! Emma pushed the synthesis inhibitor. For 3 seconds, nothing happened. Then Amy's back arched. She gasped, eyes going wide, every muscle seizing at once. The monitor went haywire. Her heart rate spiked. Blood pressure plummeted. "Emma!" Holland grabbed Amy's shoulders, trying to keep her from thrashing out of the bed. Emma checked the monitor. Watched the numbers climb and fall and settle. Amy's breathing slowed. The seizure stopped. Her eyes focused again. "Oxygen saturation rising," Holland said, disbelief in his voice. 92, 94, 96. The inhibitor worked. Emma felt something like hope crack through her exhaustion. It's blocking the pathogen's protein synthesis, breaking the oxygen blockade. Amy blinked slowly. That was horrible. Yeah, Emma was already preparing the next dose. But you're alive. She administered the inhibitor to Holland next. Same reaction, same seizure, same terrifying 30 seconds where she thought she'd killed him. Then the same miraculous recovery. By the time she got to herself, her oxygen sat was at 86, low enough that her vision was starting to tunnel. She pushed the inhibitor into her own IV and felt the seizure hit like a lightning strike, every nerve firing at once, her body trying to tear itself apart from the inside. Then peace. Emma opened her eyes. Holland and Amy were staring at her. Behind them, through the observation window, she could see dawn breaking over Boston. She'd made it through the night. They all had. "The others," she said. Her voice was hoarse from the seizure. "The other staff members." "Already done," Holland said. "While you were out, everyone's stable." Emma tried to sit up. Failed. Apparently the inhibitor came with temporary paralysis as advertised. "The CDC, we need to contact them. Let them know we have a treatment." "Already did." Holland held up a phone. "Dr. Reeves called them directly after you hung up. They're analyzing the synthesis notes now. If it checks out, they'll start mass production." "If?" "When?" Holland smiled. It looked strange on his face, like he'd forgotten how. "You did it, Emma. You found a cure." Emma wanted to feel victory, wanted to celebrate, but all she felt was tired. Tired and sick and aware that somewhere outside this building, her father was extracting intel from a bioweapon that had nearly killed everyone in this room, that the war continued regardless of whether she participated in it. A knock on the observation window. Emma turned her head. The paralysis was wearing off slowly, and saw James standing outside in full hazmat gear. He held up a phone with a message typed on the screen. "CDC cleared the wing. You're not contagious. We're coming in." Emma closed her eyes, tried to find the energy to care. Came up empty. The door opened. James entered, removing his hood. Behind him came CDC personnel in containment suits, military operators providing security, and a man in an expensive suit who had "government bureaucrat" written all over him. "Captain Voss," the bureaucrat said. "I'm Director Matthews, Homeland Security. I need you to explain exactly how you created that synthesis inhibitor and whether you have any remaining samples." Emma looked at him, at his suit and his clearance badge and his expression that said he was already planning how to classify everything that had happened here. "No," she said. Matthews frowned. "Excuse me?" "I said no." Emma forced herself to sit up despite the paralysis protesting. "You want the formula, get it from Dr. Reeves. You want the samples, synthesize your own. I'm not your lab rat. This is a matter of national security. Everything's a matter of national security to you people." Emma disconnected her IV, stood on shaking legs. "I'm a civilian nurse who saved 13 lives with materials I found in a pharmacy. That's where the story ends. If you want to make it classified, file a complaint." James stepped between them. "Director Matthews, perhaps we could discuss this outside. Give Captain Voss time to recover." "She's not a captain," Matthews said. "She was dishonorably discharged." "The discharge was overturned," James said quietly. 6 months ago. Check your files." Matthews pulled out a tablet, swiped through screens, and his expression shifted from irritation to calculation. "I see. Well, that does complicate things. It simplifies them." James crossed his arms. "Captain Voss is on temporary military commission under my authority, which means she answers to me, not you. If you have questions about what happened here, submit them through proper channels. Matthews looked like he wanted to argue. But James had 20 years of intimidating bureaucrats, and Matthews wasn't stupid enough to start a turf war in a contaminated hospital wing while CDC cameras were recording everything. "We'll be in touch," Matthews said. He left with his aides trailing behind him. James waited until they were gone, then turned to Emma. "You okay?" "No." Emma sat back down on the bed. Every muscle ached. The adrenaline crash was hitting hard now, piling on top of the sedative and the pathogen and the seizure. "But I'm alive. That'll have to be good enough." The treatment worked. Webb's stable. The CDC has his blood samples. They're working on decoding the intel right now. Good for them. "Emma, I don't want to hear it." She looked up at him. "Whatever you're about to say, thank you, good job. You should reconsider rejoining the military. I don't want to hear it. I did what I had to do. Now I want 48 hours of sleep and to never see another bioweapon again." James nodded slowly. "Fair enough. But there's something you should know." "What?" "The vault in Caracas, the intel Webb was carrying. We know what's inside now." Emma waited. She didn't want to care but couldn't stop herself from asking, "What?" James pulled out his tablet, brought up a classified file. "Names, locations, financial records, evidence of an international bioweapons trafficking network that's been operating for a decade. The contractors who hit this hospital were just hired muscle. The real players are—" He stopped. Emma saw his expression change, saw him reading something on the tablet that made his jaw tighten. "What?" she asked. "One of the names on the list." James turned the tablet toward her. "You need to see this." Emma looked at the screen, at the name highlighted in red, at the attached photo that showed a man she recognized from exactly 2 places, her nightmares and a courtroom 3 years ago. Major Richard Graves, the officer who'd pushed for her court-martial after the Mosul incident, who'd testified that her hesitation made her unfit for command, who'd smiled when the discharge came through like he'd personally won a war. "He's been selling intel to bioweapons dealers for 6 years, James said quietly. "Including the intelligence that led to the Mosul bombing. He knew that kid was wearing a vest because he'd helped arrange the purchase. He let you take the fall to cover his own operation." Emma stared at the photo, felt something cold and sharp settle in her chest. "Where is he now?" Her voice came out flat. "Unknown, but with this evidence, every agency in the government is looking for him." "Good." Emma stood, walked to the window, looked out at the dawn breaking over Boston, at the CDC mobile lab below, at the media trucks arriving to document whatever story would be fed to them about gas leaks or structural failures or any lie that kept the truth classified. She thought about Major Graves, about 3 years of carrying guilt he'd manufactured, about 12 civilians who'd died because someone decided selling weapons was more profitable than saving lives. She thought about going back to her quiet nursing job, restocking gauze, checking vitals, pretending she was someone normal who didn't know how to kill with medical equipment. Then she thought about all the other Major Graves out there, all the men in suits who turned warfare into profit margins, who would keep building bioweapons and selling them to cartels and terrorists because someone had to stop them, and it might as well be, "Emma," James said behind her. "What are you thinking?" She turned to face him. "I'm thinking," she said slowly, "that my 48 hours just became a lot more complicated." James studied her face like he was reading a threat assessment. "Complicated how?" "You have names, evidence, a paper trail that leads to people who need to be in prison." Emma turned back to the window. "But paper trails burn. Evidence disappears. People with enough money and connections walk away from things that should bury them. Not this time. We have Webb's testimony, the decoded pathogen data, financial records. You had all that 3 years ago in Mosul, too." Emma's reflection stared back at her from the glass. "You had intelligence saying that bombing was an inside job, that someone on our side had facilitated it. And what happened? They buried it, classified the investigation, found a scapegoat." The silence stretched. James didn't deny it. "Graves has friends," Emma continued. "Friends in procurement, in intelligence, probably in justice. He's been running this operation for 6 years without getting caught. You think he doesn't have contingencies, insurance files, people who will protect him because if he goes down, he takes them with him?" "So what are you suggesting?" Emma faced him. "I'm suggesting that evidence isn't enough. You need someone who can get close to him, someone he won't see coming. Someone like you. Someone exactly like me. Emma crossed her arms. The disgraced captain. The nurse who cracked under pressure and lost her nerve. I'm the perfect nobody. He'll never suspect I'm hunting him. James shook his head. You're not trained for undercover work. You're a combat medic, not an intelligence officer. I'm whatever I need to be. Emma's voice hardened. And right now, I need to be the person who makes sure Richard Graves doesn't slip away. Not for revenge. For the 12 people in Mosul who died because he sold them out. For every future victim of whatever bioweapon he's helping traffic next. Emma, don't. She cut him off. Don't tell me to let it go. Don't tell me the system will handle it. I trusted the system once. It court-martialed me while the real criminal walked free. So either help me or stay out of my way. James pulled out his phone, typed something, then put it away. Graves was last seen in Montreal 2 days ago. Canadian intelligence has been tracking him, but lost the trail near the border. We think he's trying to reach a safe house in Vermont. You're not stopping me? I'm helping you. James's expression was unreadable. Because you're right. Evidence alone won't be enough. But a first-hand witness who can testify to his current criminal activity, that's actionable. He paused. The 48-hour commission I gave you, consider it extended, indefinitely. Emma wanted to refuse, wanted to keep her distance, maintain the boundary she'd built between soldier and civilian. But pragmatism won. She needed resources, authority, access to intelligence networks she couldn't tap as a nurse. What's the catch? She asked. You work with a team. No solo operations, no cowboy heroics. I work alone, not negotiable. James pulled up a photo on his tablet. Young woman, late 20s, dark hair, eyes that had seen things. This is Agent Rachel Kwan, FBI. She's been investigating military corruption for 2 years. Lost her partner when they got too close to someone in Graves's network. She wants him as badly as you do. Emma studied the photo, saw the determination there, also the grief poorly hidden behind professional composure. She know about me? She knows a military medical officer is being temporarily attached to her investigation. Nothing about your history with Graves. That's your story to tell if you choose. When do I meet her? 30 minutes. She's downstairs waiting for clearance. James pocketed the tablet. But first you need to know what you're walking into. Graves isn't just selling bioweapons. He's part of a larger network. Military officers, defense contractors, foreign intelligence operatives. They've weaponized everything from anthrax to synthetic pathogens. The compound that almost killed Webb? That was one of their products. Emma felt ice water in her veins. How many people have died? Confirmed? 87. Suspected? Hundreds. Maybe thousands. They've been selling to cartels, terrorist organizations, rogue states. Anyone with money and no conscience. James moved closer to the window. The vault in Caracas contained their entire client list, names, locations, transaction records, but it's encrypted with a rotating cipher. We need someone inside the network to provide the decryption key. And you think Graves has it? He was the network's head of acquisitions. If anyone knows how to access the files, it's him. James turned to her. But here's the problem. Even if we catch him, even if he talks, his lawyers will delay any trial for years. Evidence will get suppressed, witnesses will disappear, and he'll walk on a technicality. Unless we catch him in the act, conducting an active transaction with witnesses, recordings, irrefutable proof of current criminal activity. James pulled out a secure phone and handed it to her. Kwan has been tracking a shipment, custom bioweapon, commissioned by a Mexican cartel. Delivery scheduled for 72 hours from now at an industrial site in New Hampshire. Graves is supposed to be there personally to oversee the handoff. Emma took the phone, felt its weight like a loaded gun. You want me to infiltrate the transaction? I want you to be there when it goes down. Medical officer presence provides cover. These deals always have a medical component in case something goes wrong with the product. You observe, you document, you get out. Kwan and her team handle the arrest. And if something goes wrong, then you do what you do best, survive. Emma turned the phone over in her hands. 3 days ago, she'd been restocking gauze and taking orders from doctors who thought she was too soft for trauma work. Now she was being asked to walk into a bioweapon deal with the man who destroyed her career. "I'll need cover credentials," she said. "Background that'll stand up to scrutiny." "Already done. You're Dr. Sarah Voss, private medical consultant, former trauma surgeon who lost her license after a malpractice suit. Bitter, broke, willing to work for anyone who pays. It's close enough to the truth that you won't have to fake much." The barb landed, but Emma didn't react. "What about Holland and the others? They're witnesses to what happened here. They'll be debriefed and released, standard non-disclosure agreements. The official story is a gas leak and structural damage. The bioweapon angle stays classified. They saved lives. They deserve recognition. They'll get it, just not publicly." James checked his watch. "Kwan's waiting. You should go." Emma started toward the door, then stopped. "The review board that overturned my discharge. You pushed for it, didn't you?" James didn't answer immediately. Then, "I read the Mosul investigation files. All of them, including the parts that got redacted from your court-martial. You made the right call. I should have said that 3 years ago." "Why didn't you?" "Because I was following orders. Because I thought loyalty to command mattered more than loyalty to the truth." He met her eyes. "I was wrong. I'm sorry." The apology sat between them like unexploded ordnance. Emma wanted to accept it, wanted to let go of 3 years of anger. But forgiveness wasn't something she could manufacture on command. "Save it for after we catch Graves," she said. Then she left before he could respond. The elevator down was empty. Emma watched the floor numbers descend and tried to process everything that had happened in the last 12 hours. She'd gone from invisible nurse to commissioned officer, from victim of bureaucratic scapegoating to active participant in bringing down the system that had failed her. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like being handed a live grenade and told to juggle. The lobby was chaos. CDC personnel in hazmat suits, police documenting the scene, reporters being held back by security. Emma moved through it all with her head down, using the secure phone James had given her to navigate to a conference room on the ground floor. Agent Rachel Kwan stood near the window, watching the media circus outside. She turned when Emma entered. Up close, she was smaller than her photo suggested, but carried herself with the compact intensity of someone who'd learned to take up space through force of will rather than physical presence. "Captain Voss," Kwan said. No handshake offered. "I've read your file, or what's left of it after the redactions. Then you know I'm a liability. I know you're someone who wouldn't shoot a kid even when ordered to. That makes you either principled or reckless depending on who's judging." Kwan pulled out a tablet and brought up surveillance footage. "Right now, I need someone who can walk into a criminal enterprise and not flinch. Your psych eval says you have trouble with authority and a tendency toward lone wolf operations. That makes you perfect for this." Emma studied the footage. It showed a warehouse in what looked like an industrial park. Men loading crates into a van. No faces visible, just body language that screamed criminal conspiracy. "This is the New Hampshire site?" Emma asked. "Taken yesterday. We've had it under surveillance for 2 weeks. Low traffic, mostly at night, always cash transactions." Kwan zoomed in on one of the crates. "These containers are designed for biological material. Temperature controlled, hermetically sealed. Perfect for transporting pathogens." "How do you know Graves will be there?" "We don't. But our informant inside the network says someone high-level is coming to oversee this delivery personally. The cartel commissioning the weapon demanded it. Too many deals have gone wrong lately, Webb's team in Caracas being one of them. They want assurance." "Your informant have a name?" "Need to know. And you don't need to know." Kwan pulled up another file. "What you do need to know is that this cartel, Salazar Syndicate out of Guadalajara, doesn't tolerate failure. If something goes wrong with this transaction, they'll kill everyone involved, including medical consultants they hired for cover." "Sounds like a great assignment." "It's a suicide mission disguised as an investigation." Kwan's expression didn't change. "I lost my partner going after these people. He got too close, asked too many questions, and they put a bullet in his head while he was grocery shopping. So understand this. I'm not interested in keeping you safe. I'm interested in getting evidence that'll put Graves and his entire network in prison for life. If you can help with that, welcome aboard. If you can't, stay out of my way." Emma recognized the tone. Loss converted to rage. Rage converted to obsession. She'd heard it in her own voice for 3 years. "Your partner," Emma said. "Was he investigating Graves specifically? Kwan's jaw tightened. He was investigating financial irregularities in military procurement. Graves's name came up during a wiretap. My partner went to interview him. Next day, dead. She closed the tablet. The official report said it was a random robbery, but his weapon wasn't taken. His wallet wasn't taken, just his phone and his laptop. Everything with evidence on it. How long ago? 8 months. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Help me catch the people who did it. Kwan pulled out a folder and handed it to Emma. Your cover identity. Memorize everything. You've got 48 hours before the meet. Emma opened the folder. Inside was a complete life story for Dr. Sarah Voss. Medical school transcripts, employment history, the malpractice suit that had ended her legitimate career. Someone had put real work into this, even included details like her favorite drink and the name of a cat she supposedly owned. This is good, Emma said, scanning the pages. Who built it? CIA. They owe me a favor. Kwan moved to the door. You'll bunk at a safe house in Portsmouth. I'll be running communications from a mobile unit nearby. You go in wired, audio, and video. We record everything. The second we have enough for an arrest, we move. What if Graves recognizes me? Will he? Emma thought back to the court-martial. Graves sitting in the gallery, smiling. She'd seen him for maybe 10 minutes total. 3 years ago. Before she'd cut her hair shorter, before exhaustion had carved lines around her eyes, before she'd learned to make herself invisible. Probably not, Emma said. But if he does, then improvise. You're good at that. Kwan opened the door. One more thing. The Salazar cartel's medical consultant position, it opened up because the last person in that role died. Exposure to their own product during a quality control test. So whatever bioweapon they're buying, it's unstable, dangerous to handle even with proper protocols. How did the consultant die? Respiratory failure took 3 days. Witnesses said he was conscious until the end. Kwan's voice was flat. Still want the assignment? Emma thought about the 12 people in Mosul, about Major Graves testifying against her while he was selling the weapons that had killed them, about Webb carrying a bioweapon in his blood because someone decided profit mattered more than lives. Yes, she said. I want it. Good. Car's waiting outside. We leave in 10 minutes. Kwan started to leave, then paused. Captain Voss, whatever personal vendetta you've got with Graves, set it aside. This is about building a case, not getting revenge. Understand? Understood. Kwan left. Emma stood alone in the conference room, holding a folder full of lies that were supposed to pass for truth. She thought about James's warning. No solo operations, no cowboy heroics. About her own tendency to ignore orders when they conflicted with what needed to be done. This was going to end badly. She could feel it, but she was going anyway. The drive to Portsmouth took 2 hours. Emma spent it memorizing her cover story, studying photos of the Salazar cartel's known operatives, and trying not to think about what could go wrong. Kwan drove in silence, focused on the road, occasionally taking calls on a secure line that Emma couldn't hear. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in a complex full of other nondescript apartments. Second floor, good sightlines, multiple exits. Someone had thought about security. Inside, the walls were covered with surveillance photos, organizational charts, financial records. A war room disguised as a living room. Kwan pointed to the couch. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow we run through your cover story until you can recite it drunk and concussed. She moved to a laptop on the dining table and started typing. Also, you'll need to pass a medical examination. The cartel vets their people. They'll want to verify you're actually a doctor. I am actually a doctor. You're a nurse with field medic training. There's a difference. Not when you've done what I've done. Emma dropped her bag on the couch. What kind of examination? Unknown. Our informant says they test for competency and discretion. Probably give you a scenario, see how you handle it. Kwan didn't look up from her laptop. Just remember, you're bitter, desperate, and morally flexible. You don't care who you're working for as long as the money's good. Emma thought about the past 3 years, working entry-level jobs with a resume full of lies, scraping by on wages that barely covered rent, watching other nurses get promoted while she stayed invisible. Won't be hard to pretend, she said. The next 48 hours blurred together. Quan drilled her on cover story details, ran through likely scenarios, taught her the hand signals and code phrases she'd need to communicate during the operation. Emma absorbed it all with the mechanical efficiency of someone who'd been trained to function under pressure. On the morning of the operation, Quan handed her a small device that looked like a button. Subcutaneous transmitter. We'll insert it behind your ear. Broadcasts audio and video through a micro camera in your glasses. Can't be detected by standard sweeps. What if they do a medical scan? Then we abort and you get out. Quan pulled out a syringe. This is important. If things go wrong, if you're compromised, you inject this. It's a fast-acting sedative. Puts you out for 6 hours. Gives us time to extract you before they can interrogate. Emma took the syringe, looked at the clear liquid inside. And if I can't inject it? Then you're on your own. Fair enough. The drive to New Hampshire was tense. Quan dropped Emma 3 blocks from the warehouse, then disappeared into the surveillance net she'd spent weeks building. Emma walked the rest of the way, carrying a medical bag full of equipment she'd been told to bring. Diagnostic tools, emergency medications, proof she knew what she was doing. The warehouse looked abandoned. Broken windows, graffiti on the walls, the kind of place squatters used until the cops cleared them out. But the lock on the door was new, industrial grade. Someone was paying attention. Emma knocked, waited. The door opened. A man in his 40s stood there. Latino, scarred face, eyes that had watched people die and hadn't lost sleep over it. Dr. Voss? That's me. ID. Emma handed over the fake credentials Quan had provided. The man studied them, then pulled out a phone and photographed them. Sent the images somewhere. Waited for a response. 30 seconds that felt like an hour. The phone buzzed. The man nodded and stepped aside. Come in. The warehouse interior had been converted into a functional space. Lights, tables, equipment that looked medical. And standing near a crate in the center of the room, inspecting its contents with the critical eye of someone who knew exactly what he was looking at. Major Richard Graves, older than Emma remembered, gray at the temples, lines around his mouth. But the same cold calculation in his eyes, the same expression he'd worn when testifying against her. He looked up as she entered. Their eyes met. Emma felt her heart rate spike. The transmitter behind her ear would be picking that up. Quan would be watching, wondering if the operation was blown. But Graves's expression didn't change. No recognition, just professional assessment. You're the medical consultant, he said. Not a question. Dr. Sarah Voss. I'm Mr. Grant, the fake name delivered without hesitation. You understand what we're doing here? Quality assurance on a biological product. I verify it's stable, provide protocols for safe handling, and consult on any medical complications during transport. Emma set down her bag. Standard contract work. I don't ask questions, you don't volunteer information. Graves smiled. I like her. She's smart. He gestured to the crate. Come here. Tell me what you see. Emma approached the crate. Inside were 6 vials of pale green liquid, the same color as the synthesis inhibitor she'd created to save Webb. Her stomach turned. Synthetic pathogen, she said, keeping her voice clinical. Engineered for respiratory transmission. Probably targets specific ethnic genetic markers based on the molecular structure. Very good. What else? Emma picked up one of the vials, held it to the light, saw the slight shimmer that indicated active biological material. It's alive, still replicating, which means it's either fresh or improperly stored. Either way, it's unstable. Graves's smile widened. Impressive. Most consultants can't tell until they run tests. You've done this before. I've seen enough bioweapons to recognize one. Emma set the vial down carefully. This is cartel work, probably commissioned for targeted elimination of a rival organization. You're selling them something that'll wipe out a specific family line. Again, very impressive. Graves pulled out a tablet. But I need to verify your credentials. Medical degree? Yes. But do you have the stomach for what this job actually requires? He turned the tablet to show her a video. Emma watched, felt bile rise in her throat. The video showed a man dying of pathogen exposure. Same symptoms Webb had shown, but this time there was no treatment. No last-minute cure, just 3 days of slow suffocation while doctors in hazmat suits took notes. That was a test subject, Graves said. Volunteer from a local prison. He knew the risks, signed a waiver, died anyway. He paused. Your predecessor couldn't handle watching that. She quit on day 2. Can you handle it? Emma looked at the video, at the man's face contorted in agony, at the doctors who did nothing to help him, at the clinical documentation of murder dressed up as research. She thought about the 12 people in Mosul, about the lies Graves had told to cover his own crimes, about every victim of every bioweapon he'd helped sell. Yes, she said, I can handle it. Graves studied her for a long moment, then he nodded. Welcome to the team, Dr. Voss. Let's discuss payment. But before he could continue, his phone rang. He checked the display, frowned, and answered. What? No, we're not. His expression changed. When? He looked at Emma, and this time she saw recognition dawn. Captain Voss, he said quietly. It's been a long time. Emma's hand moved to the syringe in her pocket. The sedative. 6 hours of unconsciousness and whatever interrogation Graves had planned for her when she woke up. But her fingers stopped, because running now meant the evidence died with her cover, meant Graves walked away, meant 12 people in Mosul stayed unavenged and hundreds more future victims became acceptable losses. She pulled her hand back empty. Major Graves, she said, I was wondering when you'd figure it out. Graves set his phone down carefully. The scarred man near the door pulled a weapon. Emma didn't move. The transmitter behind her ear was recording everything. Quan would be mobilizing the takedown team right now. She just had to stay alive long enough for them to arrive. The haircut threw me, Graves said, circling her slowly. And the posture. You used to stand like a soldier. Now you slouch like someone who's given up. Good cover work. Almost believed it myself. It's not cover. I did give up. 3 years ago when you destroyed my career. I didn't destroy anything. You destroyed yourself when you refused a direct order. He stopped in front of her. That kid in Mosul was wearing a vest. You knew it. You still didn't shoot. Because he was 13 years old and terrified. He was a weapon. You treated him like a victim. People died because of your hesitation. Emma felt the old anger rising, but pushed it down. She needed him talking, needed him to confess on tape to everything he'd done. People died because someone sold that vest to the insurgents. Someone on our side. Someone who knew that operation was happening and made sure there'd be casualties to cover their tracks. Graves's expression didn't change. Careful, Captain. Conspiracy theories are unbecoming. Not theories, facts. Emma pulled the tablet from her pocket. The one James had given her. She brought up the vault files, the decoded intelligence, the transaction records that tied Graves to weapons sales going back 6 years. You've been selling to insurgents, cartels, terrorist organizations. Anyone with money. The Mosul bombing was just one deal in hundreds. The scarred man moved closer, weapon raised. Graves held up a hand to stop him. Even if that were true, Graves said, you have no proof that'll hold up in court. Those files are classified, obtained through illegal intelligence operations. Inadmissible. But the testimony of an undercover federal agent isn't. Emma gestured around the warehouse. Every word you've said in the last 10 minutes has been recorded. Every transaction detailed. You just admitted to quality assurance on an illegal bioweapon. Admitted to human experimentation. Admitted to... Graves moved fast. He grabbed Emma's jaw, tilted her head, and found the transmitter behind her ear. Ripped it free. Blood trickled down her neck. Clever, he said, crushing the device under his boot. But ultimately pointless. Even if the FBI heard all that, they still have to catch me. And by the time they breach this building, I'll be halfway to somewhere without extradition treaties. You won't make it. Watch me. Graves pulled out his phone and typed something. My exit strategy has been in place for years. Private jet, fake passport, funds in offshore accounts. I've planned for every contingency, including betrayal by federal agents pretending to be desperate doctors. Emma's mind raced. Quan would have heard the transmission die. Would be moving in right now with tactical teams. But if Graves had an escape route, if he'd planned for this... The warehouse door exploded inward. Not FBI, not tactical teams. A van crashed through the loading bay, scattering equipment and personnel. Men in cartel colors poured out, weapons ready, moving with the coordinated violence of people who'd done this before. The Salazar Syndicate had arrived, and they didn't look happy. A man stepped out of the van. 50s, expensive suit, the kind of calm that came from absolute certainty that he controlled every situation. Behind him, 4 gunmen took positions covering all exits. "Mr. Grant," the man said. His accent was educated, Mexican, dangerous. "Or should I call you Major Graves? We've been investigating your real identity. Turns out military officers who sell bioweapons have very poor operational security when they think they're smarter than everyone else." Graves's hand moved toward his weapon. 3 guns tracked him instantly. He froze. "Marcus Salazar," Graves said. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" Salazar gestured to his men. "You've been skimming from our deals for months, selling us diluted product, keeping the real weapons for higher-paying clients. Did you think we wouldn't notice?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "The shipment in Caracas, the one your military interrupted. That was supposed to be our product, worth $12 million. Instead, we got a raid that killed half our operatives and cost us a distribution network we'd spent years building." Salazar's smile was razor-thin. "Someone tipped off the military. Someone who wanted to eliminate competition. Someone like you." Emma watched the confrontation unfold. Kwan's voice crackled in her earpiece. The subcutaneous transmitter was dead, but she'd forgotten about the backup unit built into her glasses. "Emma, we're 30 seconds out. Keep them talking." Emma spoke up. "The bioweapon he's selling you is defective. Unstable molecular structure. It'll kill your targets, but also your own people during deployment. He knows this. He's been testing it on prisoners." Salazar turned to her. "And who are you?" "The medical consultant you hired to verify product quality. Dr. Sarah Voss. And I'm telling you, this weapon will fail catastrophically when you try to use it." "She's lying," Graves said. "She's FBI. Undercover agent trying to disrupt." "I'm not FBI." Emma pulled out her medical credentials. The fake ones, the real ones, didn't matter now. "I'm a doctor who's seen what these weapons do. That man in your video, the prisoner who died, he suffered for 3 days because this pathogen attacks the respiratory system in ways current medicine can't treat. You deploy this, you're not just killing enemies. You're killing everyone who comes in contact with the infected, including your own people." Salazar studied her, then looked at Graves. "Is this true?" "Of course not. The weapon is perfectly stable." One of Salazar's gunmen walked to the crate, pulled out a vial, held it up. The green liquid inside was clouding, separating into layers, visual proof of instability. "It's degrading," Emma said. "Probably has been since it left the lab. In another 6 hours it'll be inert, useless. He sold you a weapon with a shelf life of days." Salazar's expression went cold. "I paid $12 million for this." "You paid $12 million for garbage," Emma continued. "He's been running this scam for years, selling defective product to buyers he knows won't survive long enough to complain. The ones who do? He tips off law enforcement or military, eliminates the witnesses, collects payment from both sides." Graves pulled his weapon. Emma dove behind a table as shots erupted. Salazar's men returned fire. The warehouse became a war zone. Emma crawled toward cover, glass and concrete raining around her. Through the chaos, she could see Graves making for the back exit. Couldn't let him escape. Not again. She grabbed a fallen weapon, one of the cartel gunmen's rifles, and fired 3 shots at the exit door. Graves ducked back, trapped between gunfire and Emma's position. "FBI, drop your weapons." Kwan's voice echoed through the warehouse. Federal agents poured in from multiple entrances, vests marked clearly, weapons trained. The cartel gunmen found themselves surrounded. But Graves wasn't surrendering. He grabbed Emma, pulled her up as a human shield, weapon to her head. "Everyone stops or she dies." The warehouse went silent. Kwan stood at the entrance, weapon raised, 40 federal agents behind her. Salazar's gunmen were on the ground, disarmed, zip-tied. The cartel boss himself stood with hands raised, calculating odds he clearly didn't like. "Major Graves," Kwan said, "it's over. We have the evidence, the recordings, witnesses. Put down the weapon." "You have nothing that'll survive appeals." Graves pressed the gun harder against Emma's temple. "Classified intelligence, coerced testimony, and an illegal sting operation. My lawyers will tear this apart." "Maybe." Emma's voice was steady despite the weapon against her skull. "But you'll still have to explain how you're here, in a warehouse full of illegal bioweapons, with a cartel boss who will testify against you to reduce his own sentence, with federal agents who watched you attempt murder of an undercover officer." "Shut up." "You lost, Graves. The second you recognized me, you lost. Because now you're not the puppet master. You're just another criminal trying to avoid consequences. Graves pulled the trigger. Click. Empty chamber. He'd forgotten to check his ammunition. Amateur mistake. The kind that gets you killed. Emma spun, drove her elbow into his throat, and used his momentum to throw him to the ground. He hit hard. She was on him before he could recover, knee on his chest, hands pinning his wrists. "You're under arrest," she said quietly, "for treason, weapons trafficking, conspiracy to commit mass murder, and about 40 other charges that'll keep you in prison until you're too old to remember your own name." Federal agents swarmed in, cuffed Graves, pulled him upright. He looked at Emma with something between hatred and disbelief. "This doesn't change what happened in Mosul," he said. "Those people still died because of you." Emma stood, wiped blood from her mouth where she'd bitten her lip during the fight. "You're right, they died. But not because I hesitated. They died because you sold weapons to the people who killed them. You want to blame someone? Look in a mirror." Graves opened his mouth to respond, but the agents were already dragging him away. Through the warehouse doors into the waiting vehicles, toward a future measured in prison cells and legal proceedings that would strip away every defense he'd built. Emma watched him go and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no closure, just exhaustion. Quan approached, holstering her weapon. "You okay?" Define okay. "Alive? Conscious? Not bleeding from anywhere fatal?" "Then yes, I'm okay." Emma looked around the warehouse, at the cartel gunmen being processed, at the bioweapons being carefully secured by hazmat teams, at the evidence of a criminal network being systematically dismantled. "Did we get everything?" Graves's phone had the decryption key. "We've accessed the vault files. Names, locations, everything. FBI, CIA, and about 6 other agencies are already making arrests worldwide." Quan paused. "Your testimony will be crucial at trial. You're the only witness who can tie together the Mosul bombing, the bioweapons trafficking, and today's operation." "How long until trial?" 18 months? Maybe 2 years? These things move slowly. Emma felt the weight of it. 2 years of depositions, testimony, cross-examinations. 2 years of reliving Mosul and every mistake she'd made. 2 years in legal limbo while lawyers argued about classified evidence and national security. "I'll do it," she said, "but on one condition." "What?" "The nurses and doctors at Mercy General, Holland, Amy, Martinez, they get full recognition for what they did. No classified asterisks, no redacted reports. Their names go on record as heroes who saved lives during a terrorist attack." Quan considered. "That's not my call, but I'll push for it." "Push hard." "Will do." Quan's phone buzzed. She checked it and smiled slightly. "Director Matthews wants to see you. Something about a commendation and formal apology for his behavior at the hospital. Tell him to mail it." "You sure?" This is the kind of FaceTime that advances careers. Emma thought about her career, about the uniform she'd worn and the title she'd earned and the way they'd all been stripped away when she'd refused to be the soldier they wanted her to be. She thought about the past 3 years working invisible jobs, hiding who she was, ashamed of choices that had ultimately been right, even when they'd felt wrong. "I don't want a career," Emma said. "I want a life. And lives don't get built in meetings with directors who apologize only when cameras are watching." Quan nodded slowly. "What will you do?" "I don't know yet." Emma looked at the warehouse doors, at the daylight beyond. "But whatever it is, it'll be on my terms, not theirs." She walked out of the warehouse into afternoon sun that felt too bright after the darkness inside. Outside, media trucks were arriving, reporters already shouting questions that security held back. Emma kept walking, past the vehicles, past the chaos, past the machinery of justice grinding forward without needing her anymore. Her phone rang. "James." "I heard," he said when she answered. "Graves is in custody. Network's collapsing. You did good work." "We did good work." Emma found her car. Quan's car, technically, but she'd borrowed the keys. "What happens now?" "Now? You decide. The commission I gave you is still active. You could come back. Full reinstatement, choice of assignments, your rank restored." He paused. "Or you could walk away. No judgment, no pressure. Whatever you choose, I'll support it." Emma sat in the car without starting the engine, thought about what James was offering. A return to structure, purpose, the clarity of orders and missions, A chance to be the soldier she'd once been, but she wasn't that soldier anymore. Hadn't been for 3 years. "I'm walking away," she said. "I figured." James's voice was warm. "Where will you go?" "Back to Mercy General, if they'll have me. After what you did there, they'd be stupid not to. Except I lied on my application, omitted my military service. Technically, that's grounds for termination. Technically, you're a commissioned officer who saved 13 lives during a bioterrorism attack. That tends to override hiring paperwork." James was quiet for a moment. "Emma, you don't have to keep punishing yourself. What happened in Mosul? You made the right call. The world's not black and white. Sometimes the choice that looks like weakness is actually courage." "You sound like a fortune cookie." "I sound like a father who's proud of his daughter." The words hit harder than Emma expected. She felt her throat tighten. "Don't get sentimental on me now." "Too late. I've been reading parenting books. Turns out I was terrible at it for 18 years. Thought maybe I could do better going forward." "James, I know. You need space. I'm giving you space. But when you're ready to talk, really talk, I'll be here. No uniforms, no ranks, just family." Emma wiped her eyes. "I need to go." "I know. Take care of yourself, Emma." She ended the call and sat in the silence. 3 years ago, she'd walked away from everything she knew because staying meant being someone she couldn't live with. Today, she'd walked back into that world and proven she could survive it without losing herself. That had to count for something. She started the car and drove back to Boston. The city looked different now, less hostile, more like a place where she could build something real instead of just hiding. Mercy General loomed ahead, the north wing still under construction from the attack. Emma parked in the visitor lot and walked to the main entrance. Inside, the hospital had returned to normal operations. Nurses at stations, doctors making rounds. The constant rhythm of saving lives. Dr. Holland saw her first. He was standing near the nurses' station, reading a chart. Looked up, did a double take. "Emma, I didn't think—" He set down the chart. "We heard what happened. The news is calling it a federal takedown of an international weapons ring. They're saying a medical professional provided crucial intelligence." "That wasn't me. That was the FBI." "Right. Of course." Holland smiled slightly. "Except Amy recognized you in the background of one news shot. The angle was wrong, but she swears it was you. Amy has an overactive imagination. She also says you're a hero, says you saved her life twice, once during the hospital attack, once during the contamination." Holland crossed his arms. "Administration wants to talk to you. Something about your employment application having discrepancies." "I figured. They also want to offer you a supervisory position in trauma services. Full credentials. Whatever salary you want. Benefits, pension, the works." He paused. "I may have strongly recommended they make the offer." Emma stared at him. "Why?" "Because in the 12 hours I spent thinking I was going to die from a bioweapon, the only person who never stopped fighting to keep us alive was you, because you synthesized a treatment from pharmacy supplies and chemistry you shouldn't even know. Because when everyone else was falling apart, you held us together." Holland extended his hand. "You're exactly the kind of nurse, the kind of person this hospital needs." Emma shook his hand, felt the genuine respect there. Not the performative kind, the earned kind. "I'll think about it," she said. "Take your time, but not too much time. Amy's already started a petition to make you her supervisor. She's got 60 signatures." Emma smiled despite herself. "Tell her I'm flattered, but also slightly concerned about her judgment." "Will do." Holland returned to his chart, then looked back. "Emma, thank you for everything." She nodded and walked toward the trauma wing. The same corridors where she'd been dismissed as too soft, too inexperienced, too much of a liability to trust with real responsibility. Now they felt different, like coming home to a place that had finally decided she belonged. Amy found her near Trauma 2, standing outside the observation window, looking at the empty beds. The vented patients had been transferred to other facilities. The room had been cleaned, repaired, made ready for the next crisis. "You came back," Amy said. "Apparently I'm a glutton for punishment. Or you actually care about this place." Amy moved to stand beside her. "Dr. Holland told me about the job offer. Are you taking it?" "I don't know. Supervisory work means meetings, paperwork, politics. It also means you'd have authority to change how things work. To make sure nurses like you, like us, don't get dismissed because we don't fit someone's narrow definition of competent. Amy glanced at her. You could make this place better. Emma thought about that, about the power that came with titles and positions, about using it to protect people instead of controlling them. Maybe, she said. That's not a no. Amy grinned. I'm counting it as a yes. Over the next week, Emma met with hospital administration. Fielded job offers from 3 other hospitals who'd heard about her role in the attack, testified in preliminary hearings for Graves's case, gave statements to federal investigators building cases against the entire trafficking network. Through it all, she kept returning to Mercy General, kept finding herself in the trauma wing, checking on patients she'd never met, reviewing protocols she officially had no authority to change yet. Dr. Holland found her there one evening, standing near the nurses' station after a double shift she'd volunteered for. You're working shifts you're not even hired for, he said. Someone has to cover the gaps. Emma. Holland waited until she looked at him. Take the job. Stop punishing yourself by staying in limbo. You've earned this. I lied on my application. You omitted information to protect yourself. There's a difference. And frankly, after everything that's happened, if the board tries to hold that against you, I'll resign in protest. So will half the staff. He handed her a folder. This is your formal offer, Supervisor of Trauma Services. Starting salary of $140, full benefits, authority to restructure protocols and hire new staff. Accept it. Emma opened the folder, read the offer letter, saw her name, her real name, Emma Voss, printed at the top. They know about my discharge, she said quietly. They know it was overturned. They know you saved lives here. They know you're the best person for this job. Holland smiled. Take it, Emma. Build something. Be someone. On your own terms. She signed the offer letter that night. 3 months later, Emma stood in the renovated trauma wing during its reopening ceremony. The North Wing had been rebuilt, stronger than before. New equipment, new protocols, new training programs she'd designed based on battlefield medicine and hard-learned lessons about crisis response. James attended in civilian clothes, sitting in the back, not drawing attention. Just a father watching his daughter receive recognition she'd earned. Amy was there, promoted to senior nurse after Emma had personally recommended her. Holland had been named Chief of Emergency Services. Martinez had received a commendation for his actions during the attack. The hospital board gave speeches about resilience and recovery, about moving forward while honoring the past, about the staff who'd held the line when everything went wrong. They didn't mention the classified details, didn't talk about bioweapons or military operations or the trafficking network that had been dismantled. That was all buried in sealed files and redacted reports. But they mentioned Emma by name, recognized her leadership during the crisis, thanked her for innovations in trauma protocols that were already saving lives. When the ceremony ended, Emma found James in the hallway. You came, she said. I promised I'd be here when you built something worth building. He gestured to the renovated wing. This qualifies. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that comes after years of tension slowly releasing. I'm proud of you, James said finally. Not because you're a soldier, because you're you. The person who refuses to compromise on what matters, who fights for the right reasons even when it costs everything. I learned that from someone, Emma said. Eventually, James smiled. Better late than never. He left shortly after. Emma watched him go and felt the last piece of anger dissolve. Not forgiveness, exactly, but acceptance. Understanding that people made mistakes and growth happened slowly and family was complicated even when both parties were trying. That night, Emma returned to her apartment. Small place, nothing fancy but hers. She'd stopped using the name Sarah, stopped hiding who she'd been. The people who mattered knew her story now. The people who didn't matter could speculate all they wanted. She made coffee and sat by the window watching the city, thought about the past 3 years, about how she'd spent them running from a version of herself she thought was broken. But she wasn't broken. She'd just been waiting for the right place to heal. Her phone buzzed. Message from Amy in the group chat she'd started with the trauma wing staff. Photo of tonight's shift. Everyone tired, everyone smiling, everyone alive. This team works because of you, Amy's message read. Thanks for not giving up on us. Emma typed back. Thanks for not giving up on me. She set down her phone and stared out at Boston, at a city full of people who needed doctors and nurses and healers who understood that strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and choosing to rebuild anyway. Somewhere out there, Major Graves sat in a cell awaiting trial. The trafficking network he'd built was destroyed. Hundreds of potential victims would never face the weapons he'd sold. That mattered. But what mattered more was the kid with the broken arm who'd come into the trauma wing yesterday. The woman who'd survived a car crash because someone knew the right protocols. The nurse who'd asked Emma for advice on handling a difficult patient and actually listened to the answer. Small moments, quiet victories. The kind of impact that didn't make headlines but changed lives anyway. Emma had spent 3 years being told she wasn't good enough, wasn't strong enough, wasn't the right kind of soldier or nurse or human being. She'd spent those same 3 years proving every one of them wrong. Not by being perfect, not by following orders without question, but by staying true to the principles that mattered even when the cost was everything she'd built. The nurse they'd underestimated had become the person they needed. The woman they'd dismissed had proven that power wasn't about rank or recognition. It was about knowing your worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Emma Voss had been a soldier, had been a victim of corruption, had been a nurse fighting for respect in a system that didn't value her. Now she was something better. A healer who understood that saving lives meant more than following protocols. A leader who protected her team instead of controlling them. A person who'd walked through hell and chosen not to become what burned her. The coffee went cold as she sat there. She didn't notice, didn't care. For the first time in 3 years, Emma felt something she'd forgotten how to recognize. Peace, not the absence of conflict. The acceptance that conflict was survivable, that mistakes could be learned from, that the people who tried to break you didn't get to define who you became. Emma Voss had been underestimated, dismissed, and discarded, and she'd spent every day since proving that the only opinion that mattered was her own. Outside, Boston kept living. People laughing, fighting, loving, dying, surviving. The hospital would be busy tomorrow. There would be crises that needed her skills, staff who needed her leadership, patients who needed someone willing to fight for them when no one else would. Emma would be there. Not because she had something to prove anymore, but because she'd finally figured out who she was when nobody was watching. And that person was enough.